All right, guys. It is 8 o'clock Eastern, which means it is go time. Guys, welcome to Beaver Talk Politics. You're joining me on my normal time where you would join me for the Mossy side with the Moose. But as you can see, we're definitely doing something different, guys. You are joining me on the first section of our 24-hour live coverage of the Ontario election. And we say 24 hours, guys, but in all honesty, we're starting 8 p.m. Eastern right now, and we're going to be going to 1 a.m. Friday morning Eastern time. So that's like 29 hours we're going to be going. So we're looking forward to, guys. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. And I hope you guys can kick around as much as possible. You got to sleep at some point, of course, but hopefully moving forward, you guys will stay tuned and stick with us as we make it through the next 24 to 29 hours. All right. So before we actually get going on information and getting people to come up and chat about Ontario politics and how it's going to affect the country, guys, just want to say a couple things beforehand here. Again, we've got a hell of a lineup for you guys. 29 hours is what we're potentially looking at. So what's going to happen is you've got me for the first 3 hours, and Pixie is taking over after me. So that would be 11 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. Pacific time is when Pixie takes over. And we've each got, by the looks of it, 3-hour intervals where we'll be hosting 3 hours each. And then at the end of everything, guys, so tomorrow at 5 p.m. Pacific or 8 p.m. Eastern is when you're going to have all us Beavers as we get the live information coming in, live results from the polling, and see how our government layout ends up being in Ontario. So we're super stoked to do this with you guys and bring you all into it. As well, guys, we do have some live goals up there for gifts. So if you feel compelled, by all means, we welcome it. We're not going to push it. We understand not everyone can do it, and that's completely fine. That's entirely up to you guys. They're there. Help us get to the goals if you can. And as long as you enjoy what we're doing, show some love that way. As well, guys, if you go to our link tree, we do have a link in there for this marathon we're doing. If you would like to donate to Beaver Politics and help us move forward and grow, go on over to our link tree on our profile, and you can click on it there. And if you feel like donating and helping us grow, it's fantastic. If not everyone can. We understand that. So thank you so much for even just joining us on this marathon and watching across the country, guys. We really appreciate it. As well, guys, we do have a Discord. So you can reach out to Charity, or it should be on our link tree as well, guys, where you can come join us in our conversations over on our Discord. No charge. Come be a part of the conversation over there, and let's all do this together. That's what this is all about. All right, guys, fantastic. With that all said and done, let's get into Ontario politics. Guys, if there's anyone in Ontario that would like to come up and chat about what we're looking at in terms of this election, by all means, please come on up. I value your input and I value your voice. As well, if there's other people outside of Ontario that are paying close attention and want to chime in, by all means, send a request to come up and be part of the conversation as to the election here in Ontario. Guys, so key points I want to point out here. Doug Ford, with all his promises in terms of housing, in terms of education, in terms of how he's going to bolster our economy and get things moving forward that way, you got to keep it in context. I mean, they've been in power, what? I think we're going on 8 years now already. Sorry, 7 years that the Conservatives have been in power in Ontario, and really things have gotten worse under the Conservative watch and under Doug Ford's watch, right? So you got to keep that in mind. All the other parties, a lot of them have different solutions in terms of housing, healthcare, education, The biggest platform, or best put together platform, I should say, is the Green Party, in all honesty, on the provincial level here in Ontario. Um, it's a lot more substantive. They go into detail on how they're going to do it, what kind of spending we're looking at, how they're going to, for lack of better words, toss that money around to bolster housing, to bolster the unhoused, to take care of education, take care of healthcare system. So it's really detailed, guys. I encourage you to go take a look. You can find that online as well. And most news outlets on their websites actually have a list of different things in terms of promises and whatnot from all the different parties. So pay attention to that stuff as well. Yeah, happy. Good to see you, Joe. Good to see you. Both a little quiet there. That's okay.
Sorry, I'm just yelling at my son.
I had to just get my headphones working.
There you go. So, guys, what are your key thoughts going into the election tomorrow for Ontario?
So, I actually had a live last night while we watched the debate. Actually, sorry, that was the other debate, but I did have a watch for the Ontario one too. Yeah, and Schreier was very much the big surprise in regards to the debates. So it's going to be a lot of that. My problem I still have with the entire thing right now is there's still a lot of hesitancy. And some people just completely unaware there's even an election going on, which I think Dougie's banking on. To be honest here, he knows people aren't involved. He knows people aren't aware. I mean,
I think he knows that people don't like. During these kinds of moments, we know that the incumbent is usually supported by the populace because that's just, I guess, how things have worked in the past. Hey, look, baby. And so I think, Doug Ford is capitalizing on this to get an extra, he'll get 2 years extra on his term if he, what?
Yeah, so
how would he get 4 extra years?
So he'll have another 4 years.
Wait, when is the original Ontario election wasn't going to be for another 2 years, wasn't it?
1 year.
Or 1 year early?
Yeah, he's doing it 1 year early right now, but regardless of how much earlier he's doing it, as soon as you finish that election, you get another 4 years.
Yeah, 4 years, but they're not 4 extra.
No.
That's what I meant, extra. I obviously know when you get elected, you get 4 years, a 4-year mandate.
Yeah, guys, and
I'm not
Doug
conservative over here.
He is banking on people paying attention to what's going on with the U.S. and the tariff situation and how he's handling it. Right? Look at the press conference comments that he's made with Justin Trudeau and the other premiers in terms of
JB.
Canada. We got to put Canada first. He calls out Danielle Smith for her stance in terms of dealing with the trade and tariffs right now on the Alberta level. So he talks a good game. But one thing that I point out, and I was on with Treaty Bird on Monday on Indigenous Matters, and I had pointed out, like, you need to keep in mind, guys, like, Trump is doing everything that he is in terms of America and all the different stuff we're seeing for resources, right? Look at what he said to Ukraine. You need to start paying us back with your natural resources.
Yeah. Turns out they might sign that deal, though. Turns out Ukraine might sign that because it puts military bases, U.S. military bases in Ukraine within their borders. So turns out Zelensky might have
what borders will remain.
But
what borders will remain.
Yeah, that's the thing right there is the negotiation. Like if the U.S. does want that and say Zelensky says, yeah, fine, we'll do that if we get our old borders back. Now where's the pressure going to be, right? Like, because that's a lot.
That's an example. Look at what he's been saying about Greenway. It's all about resources. Doug Ford wants to open up the Ring of Fire for its resources. Yes, it'll go towards different things made in Ontario, like EV batteries and such like that. But a lot of whatever minerals and whatever stuff that we do pull out most likely is going to go across the border to the south to America. And
Yep.
that's what Trump is banking on, right? So that's a way you can tell how Doug Ford is actually doing things, because he knows America is going to benefit from us pulling those resources out up here, and how they're just going to be able to trickle down and benefit from it as well.
What's that
Doug Ford has
mining
been a bro
process?
boy
Like,
for a
sorry,
long time. He
sorry, I
he
didn't hear you,
really
Miss
has.
Radical. Can you? What was that, Miss Radical? Sorry, I
I
was.
said I said Doug Ford's been a bro boy for a long time. We've seen this over and over and over again. We saw him out in the US making our premiers look like clowns. He stayed behind with his Tim Houston because, well, Tim Houston gave him such a wonderful idea of the early election. Worked so well for Mr. Houston that maybe
Right?
they extended a trip together. But yeah, it's pretty disgusting how he's manipulating the people of Ontario.
Yeah, absolutely. And like people aren't even looking at his failures. You know, they're just
No. They're not looking at the $400 million that he's giving to American companies, 150 of it being Elon Musk himself. People aren't looking at the fact that he's had many, many failed projects like the bucket beer or the license plate. Nobody's looking at the fact that he's gone through and completely demolished a public area called the Ontario Place to turn it into a private spa that most people in Toronto, let alone Ontario tourists,
do
will
you
not
think
be able to afford to go to.
well it would create a lot of like casino like jobs, you know, like you know how the casinos add but take away from the community.
Yeah.
But like do you think that if elected, if somebody else were to be elected, what do you think they would do to the Ontario Place project as it stands now?
I don't know. It's a good point.
Yeah.
It's an
No.
excellent point, but it's also one of those. You're right. They might not do anything with the existing one, but what's the next Ontario place is going to sell off? You know, he's already made moves trying to grab
But
the green
are,
space.
you know how we're
He's going to go
locked in
grab
with
something else.
FIPA though? You know how we're locked in with FIPA, right? Like it's
Yeah. Hmm.
ironclad. Trying to
Yep.
get out of that would cost us more than just riding it out. I wonder if the same kind of, you know, structure would be in place for these kinds of
More than
enterprises.
likely.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing to me is, especially when it comes to stuff and scandals and how he's kind of backdoor deal, is the greenbelt. Uh, all the other parties have said like they'll roll back and repeal the greenbelt stuff, because I mean, as we watch the debates, especially the main one, where he just flat out said, I lied about it, I apologized, and I did it anyway. His own words saying like, I went and did it anyway, right? So. Um, that sort of stuff. The 407, all the other parties had talked about buying back parts of the 407 back under the provincial, so that way they can take care of it and maintain
Yep.
yada yada yada. So that's a big sticking point. Doug would, I mean, he's talking about building a tunnel under the 401. So that's something that will never actually come to fruition. And even if it were, I mean, his own argument is that within the next 10 years, our highways in southern Ontario are going to be to max capacity. But an underground tunnel under the 401 would take a minimum of 40 years before it's actually completed and be able to actually use it, right?
They could
So it's
literally
not,
build another city in that time
yeah,
span.
yeah, exactly.
As somebody who's actually two of us who've experienced a tunnel being built in our city downtown core, as Happy's laughing at knowing exactly where I'm going with this, I could tell you it's never on time and it's never on budget and shit goes wrong every single time.
Yeah.
You know, between a couple of small collapses to a massive collapse that almost ate the entire Rideau Center, a huge mall in downtown Ottawa, to the budget overruns, to the timeline. Because I remember it was supposed to be like I think 5 years overdue, plus the trains being undone. And obviously, this is not going to be an issue for the highway, but again, I could see them the entire they're going to go through. They're going to have structural collapses from buildings as you're taking away structure underneath. Like digging underground is an expensive and dangerous, full of unknowns because you don't know what's underneath there. You don't know if there was any previous diggings that was backfilled, improperly backfilled because it was just we dump it on top, we don't care. But if you dig underneath it, it all falls down because it's just loose dirt. So it's a terrible idea. But the only thing is, I could see him still doing it, not because he thinks it's going to solve the problem. He doesn't give a shit about it. But it's going to give, because he's got construction buddies, it's going to give them work and contract money for at least 40 plus years.
Yeah.
And again, I'd say easily probably 50 to 60 years because of it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
everybody's going to pay for it.
Yeah,
Yeah, and that shows the public money going into private corporate.
but that doesn't even solve the problem, right?
Yeah,
It just diverts congestion. And that's a fraction of what the actual urban issues are. We're
In
building
50 to
up.
60 years. It'll take
Exactly.
50 to 60 years for it to be close to effective for any use.
I think a far better use of taxpayer dollars, like, I mean, just spitballing, like I said, build another city and have, I don't know, a transportation budget that can connect them. Like if we had satellite cities connecting us to Toronto, we would have a better ability to manage the housing issues, and we could have, in every satellite city could be facilitated with, everything needed in a 15-minute city, uh, and then have some kind of hyperloop or whatever I don't know what they call it. I think hyperloop is
I
what they
believe is
call
one term.
it, right? Like, or have a system like they do in Japan or China.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
very.
and even that we need to realize would take a significant amount of time, but at least they'd be going towards an end goal in alleviating what's on the roads. Because I mean, when you're building more highways, when you're building more roads, you're essentially creating your own problem, because the more room you have, the more people that are going to use the highways, creating its own loop of congestion and issues, right?
And in a government controlled environment, I saw that, and with the amount of money needed, I saw that they were able to build a city in 41 months. 41 months, and they built a functioning city because they took federal resources and pulled them all. I'll look it up again what it was. I mean, this isn't a joke. It's like $500 million to, like, start, and then, like, end cost will be $20 billion, right? And then by the time you get to a full functioning state of the art city, this could be $100 billion. But those are all steps along the way, and that eventually takes about 30 years as well. In the models that I've seen, these would be state of the art cities. I fail to understand why we keep throwing good money after bad, and continue to just congest these cities.
No, absolutely. I agree 100%. Guys, just going to move on here. We got a couple more people. Coop, can I ask where you're from in Canada?
Um, Tillsonburg, Ontario.
Hey, there you go. You might not have been here when I announced this is Beaver Politics, and we're doing a 24-hour marathon, technically 29, leading into the Ontario election. So, what are your thoughts going into the election, and what the outcome might be, or platforms, or really any thoughts?
Well, that one guest that was just on a few minutes ago, and he said about building like satellite cities and everything, and I agree. I'll admit I'm a conservative. I don't always agree with everything Doug Ford does, but I've never agreed with everything that any politician's ever done. So I'll just get that out of the way first. But when that guy was talking about building satellite cities, and then he said about how building more roads is just going to it's just going to fill up again, and we're still going to have the congestion. But if you build a satellite city, you have to build roads to get to them. So I just found that comment a little off because you still got to have roads going to satellite cities. And where would you build another city? And it's not that it's a terrible idea, but people want to live in the big city. And I mean, I don't. I'm a country boy. I would go mental living in anything over 20,000. And I just but people move where they want to move to, right? I'll just stop right there and let you comment on that right up.
sometimes, and I appreciate the pushback. I mean, that's fine. But yeah, I did include public transportation as one of the focuses we would need to have in order for um, that kind of philosophy to take to be viable. We would need transportation. We would need roadworks, and we would need infrastructures. But that alleviates the density in the actual core of the downtown area, which would free up space, which would then maybe take away a little bit of the cost, right, associated with this whole capitalist kind of like supply and demand thing. We're creating more of a supply, right? And I feel like, you would be able to include like emergency services and all that in those, so you wouldn't do the congestion of the services in the urban areas, and you would still be within reachable distance. Like I live, if I were to drive downtown on an off hour, like not rush hour, it would take me about 8 to 11 minutes to get downtown core from my house. Um, I about. But like if it's congested and I take public transportation, it could take me 45 minutes to half an hour. Instead of if I'm driving myself, it would take me about an hour and a half to an hour 45 because of the congestion. So having solutions like public transportation, a way of evolving that is critical for the success of these satellite cities. And the idea is that we wouldn't pound it in. You'd still have access to it, but you wouldn't be stuck there. And this works in many different regions around the world. We've seen these templates be successful. Yeah, absolutely. There was something else he said. He questioned about the idea. It's just an idea too, right? It's not like I'm actually like, hey, this is going to work 100%. It's an idea.
Yep. I was going to make a quick comment to Red Mage there. Back in the day, snowfalls would be cleared in less accidents. So, as somebody that is a snow removal specialist, the way snow removal works, whether it's like your municipal, it's subcontracted out, or it's like me and I work for just a private contractor, every single year that we have these funny snowfalls, your budget is affected by that. So, I was just looking at the local, page on Facebook, and why are they out scraping the pavement and do, and it's like, because then if they don't, you have no budget next year. So if you get 6 feet in a week next year, you're going to be crying, well, why isn't anything getting plowed? Well, because there's no budget, because you were crying because they were plowing slush in February last year. And it's the way fuel, diesel, hydraulic oil, parts, oh my God, downtime, your wages, it's so, when you load it out in trucks, like I'm in northern BC, like the water flows to the Arctic up here, like I'm way up here. And it's crazy how, in a week, a pile can be so big, it's absolutely, and then it's +5 and the whole thing is flooded. And you have to load it out in trucks. That is incredibly expensive.
Toronto,
I don't think people realize that it's not just the plow. Like a loaderman, I get paid about 28 an hour. It's not a lot, but I love the crew and I love my sites and I like my partner, so I'm fine with it. But you know, to pay, we have a crew of about 20 guys just on night shift, and we have almost 200 sites on night shift, and that's a lot to manage. It's a lot of things to go wrong, and having a heavy duty mechanic on standby at night is incredibly difficult.
yeah.
And then all of a sudden, like you can call Brant at 3, like when we were logging, I can call Brant at 3:30 and be like, hey, I'm going to be back in town at 8. Can you leave this in the drop box for me? And we'll come pick up this hose or this module for the buncher. I can't do that at 2 a.m. There's no way I can do that at 2 a.m., right? So I think that people, when you're talking about building roads, when you're talking about contracts, like the first and foremost, contractors have to bid low to get work. And if you have never worked in a contracting environment, like my dad had a logging contracting business for 30 years. And he would squeeze himself to the point where he would lose money on contracts just to get work, just to keep money moving. And you could lose 20, 30 grand in a few months on a contract, and that's best case scenario. So when we're talking about, building homes, building infrastructure, maintaining that infrastructure, or my hometown in Prince George, the all the plumbing under the city, is one, it's full of lead, and two, it's absolutely rotting, and they're having huge sinkholes. It's destroying major intersections. It floods underneath. It's damaging people's homes and rental units, and the cost of that, I don't think people can fathom. And city workers get paid, a little jealous because you see six of them standing around doing nothing sometimes, and they get $10 more an hour than I do. But it's very expensive, and just the way that the landscape is changing when you're dealing with any kind of heavy equipment is wild. So right now, what I run a little 908 mini loader. It's very small. You can put a skid steer bucket on it. That's how small this loader is. It has no depth. It's tiny, right? That machine with no bucket is $7,000 a month. That's not fuel. That's not my wage. That's not diesel. That's not nothing. And when you start getting into bigger construction, you're getting trucks. Trucks are very expensive, and they break all the time, especially newer trucks. It's crazy. So the logistics of trying to do this construction, I don't know how it can be done in a way where it's, I don't know, it's cost effective to build all this new infrastructure and maintain it and maintain the roads. Because in Canada, roads get beat up here. Like we all know, roads get absolutely beat up here in Canada.
Yeah, so a part of that, to tie into the Ontario election stuff, looking at Ontario right now, a lot of people don't realize that Doug Ford and the Conservatives have slowly been putting responsibilities onto the municipalities,
Yep.
meaning they're now having to fund and in charge of different roadworks, different snow removal aspects on the highways that go through their communities, all that sort of stuff. Garbage and dumps have also, been put down to the municipalities. So many different things, and that's why you're seeing so many municipalities. The biggest one being Toronto, we hear in the news, having to raise their taxes the way they are because they're responsible for so much more, and
Yeah, but
their budget.
the taxes hadn't been appropriately addressed in over a decade, apparently, when the auditing came in, right? Like it was run under conservative government, and then it was fostered by a provincial government later on that was looking to just tank the system, So they had to raise the taxes, but you know, I still think they're throwing good money after bad by continuing to just build upwards in urban areas like Toronto.
Yeah,
When you
can I
Oh, and all of the snow that's melting after all the money that they spent, that Doug Ford spent on the watersheds and selling out the watersheds and selling out green space. All that is still back on the table now, by the way. And the deal that he supposedly canceled with Elon, that's back on the table as well, right? Nobody talks about that in the public eye. They just want the big, strong conservative to stand up and say he's doing all this stuff when in fact he's capitulating the entire way. And now, after all of those sweetheart deals to his buddies in construction, Toronto is going to flood again this year, and it is going to bring everything to a standstill. Just completely bottleneck the system, public transportation or not.
Yeah, can I throw something in there?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, so I think it was Happy. He was talking about garbage disposal, and my county, they've been doing their own garbage paid for at the county level. It's never been anything that the province has handled. It's been handled at the county level for like the last 35 or 40 years that I can remember, because I used to haul transport via transport Toronto's garbage. Like Toronto doesn't even deal with their own garbage. They ship it out to everywhere else where nobody else really wants it, but somebody's paid for it. Like a lot goes to London, some goes to Arkona, and some still actually goes to Michigan. Um, yeah, it's like, and the downloading from the federal to the provincial down to municipalities has been happening for a long, long time. Don't kid yourself. It just didn't start with Ford. Now, do I think he's doing a great job? Absolutely not. But I don't think that he can be blamed for everything. Like I've got documents on my computer from the Ontario Health Coalition, and I'm just going to dive into another topic here really quick, that they talked about when Kathleen Wynne was premier, how she decimated the healthcare system and lack of funding. And like if you look back through the history of the healthcare in Ontario, every premier since well before even Mike Harris, Bob Ray, Bill Davis, they've all fought with the government over wages and
So
funding. Like they've never been happy with any
in
government.
terms of, so I'm just going to use one example because you pointed out healthcare, and you're right. Over time, regardless of what party has been in power on the provincial level, especially in Ontario, there have been cuts to different sectors that we've seen, regardless of the party that has the most power. However, when it comes to healthcare, and I'll use this one because Doug Ford, at like the moment he got in his first term, announced that they were looking into healthcare spending and they were going to figure out, where they can trim things off. And I remember it was like not hundreds, but tens of millions of dollars that he had cut from the healthcare budget within the first, 6 to 8 months of being in power in his first administration, right? So that sort of stuff, or first cabinet, I should say. So that sort of stuff was absolutely accelerated by him. And we've seen it across the board for education as well, and other sectors where he had a lot of funding. You're right, absolutely been underfunded, or funding had been cut in the past before him, but he exacerbated things. Meanwhile, like I'll use putting Service Ontario into Staples. All that is a way for him to give his corporate buddies at Staples handouts from the government, because he gave them millions of dollars to retrofit their stores. You lost good unionized jobs, and now it's minimum wage jobs, people that are employed by Staples.
Those were, it was actually a little bit different because it wasn't so much the unionized job, but it was also a bunch of private businesses that were owned by Ontario people. And now suddenly all this was taken away when it moved over to Staples at our expense, which should have never been at our expense. This is somebody taking it over. You should be paying for that. And we paid for that expense and shut down Ontario-owned businesses that people had for like 40 years. I'm really pissed off about this. Like, it was and still is a disaster that he should be ashamed for, and nobody's saying anything.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, working dad.
How's it going? First off, thanks for having me. I've talked to Happy a bunch of times in different lives, so it's always nice to see him. You know what? Honestly, I don't support Doug Ford myself. I actually voted in the advance polls on Saturday, and someone told me apparently only 6% of people voted in the advance polls. I'm like, that's scary. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm actually scared of this election because the problem is we're facing a point where people just think their vote doesn't count. And it's really scary because the last election was 43%.
Voter apathy.
Like, I would say this. Like, here's the thing. People say, well, my vote doesn't count. My vote doesn't count. 57% of the province not voting. 100% your vote would have counted. I'm just curious. Did any, because I follow JB on here as well on TikTok. Did anyone actually get to view his smart voting site, by the way?
Absolutely.
He's had a lot of hits.
Yeah, I've been making videos to bolster that and make sure people know about it. Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm actually in Kitchener. So I actually have the Green Party candidate, Ashling Clancy. She is a wonderful person. I actually got to meet her recently, and she is super sweet. I can't wait for us to re-vote her back in, personally, because she's very articulate with what she says. And you know what? It's one less seat for Ford at the end of the day. But I will say, I keep seeing statistics, and people are saying that there's a huge chance that he's going to get a supermajority again.
So I can confirm that in regards to 6% voter turnout, it's been reported by CBC, CB24, City News, quite a few other news outlets. It's only been 6% on the advanced polling. I myself haven't done the advanced polling, which I did before, because I didn't get my voter cards till Monday. And this was a common thing. Now, in hindsight, after reading up on the Elections Ontario, you don't need the voter cards to go voting, but it just it does make it a little bit easier. So at least we got that. It also helps, and the Ontario site can also help you confirm which is your polling location. Mine didn't change, but I know a few people that actually did for whatever reason. So again, this comes back to my point where there's some people that have no clue there's an election going on. And so
Yep.
without the voter cards showing up on time, and it almost feels like he's banking on that, people
So-
aren't even going to be showing up.
Here's my question of that one. So I'm not sure if you would know this. So because our people's voter cards are not showing up, like I got mine in today, but obviously I advance voted on Saturday because I follow Ashlyn on Instagram. So I knew when to vote for the advanced polls, right? But there are so many Ontarians that aren't. If people do not receive their voting cards, isn't that on the provincial government for not doing their job, like elections for not doing their job? Wouldn't that be considered election interference?
Not really.
I'm going to throw something in there on that and just say no, because I went and did the advance polls on Saturday and I got almost to the polling station. I was like, oh shit, I forgot my voter card. So I just pulled out my ID and I voted.
Yeah.
Right.
You're
as
still
far
on
as,
the rules.
you talked a little bit. I think it's Working Dad. I think it is. I can't see.
Yep. Working Dad.
Yeah, so you talked a little bit about the voting numbers and how low they are, and I kind of chimed in with, oh, just hold on a second. I'm driving my transport truck, by the way, right now, but I am on a Bluetooth wireless headset. So
of course, I assume you're being safe.
yeah.
Yes.
So anyways, voter apathy is terrible, and voter apathy is terrible is because the quality of any politician in any party is what we're getting. What do we get? We get scandals. We get governments that only do bidding for certain things and are looking after their own interests or only looking after certain regions. And but going back to, I've heard people say, well, people should be made to vote or give them $100 tax credit on their taxes if they vote. I would rather only see 50% of the people vote and have the low voter turnout for the people that are informed. Otherwise, you got a bunch of idiots walking into a polling booth going, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, which name do I like the best, and voting that way. That's my comment on that.
I don't know that's what would happen, though.
Yeah, so just quick, Sasquatch has been sitting for a while. Sasquatch, you want to chime in?
Sure.
Well, I'll start. First of all, I am in BC, so I'm not in Ontario.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kind of jumped in to speak more on contracts and road building and stuff of that nature because I am an operator and I've been running hose and loaders for years, and that's kind of the environment that I was raised in. So I was chiming in more on that. I've been kind of trying to keep tabs on the Ontario election, but I'm not by no means an expert. But yeah, the one thing I was thinking of is I wish I could remember the name. On YouTube, there's a creator that is so vehement about public transport in our cities and restructuring our cities. And he moved from the United States to the Netherlands in maybe the mid 2010s. And he's like, it's incredible. The kids all ride bikes to school. Like, they're way healthier. There's almost no congestion. And the way that they zone buildings, like you can have, your home and a business in the same building. And you can walk to the grocery store down the street. And because it's zoned that way, instead of having these big mega Walmart malls that, you've got this massive parking lot for all these vehicles that it's not making any money. So you have to imagine that whoever owns that land is going to be charging premium for the storefront itself or whatever part is actually making money, because that's how they can recoup their money, by owning this huge piece of land where, a quarter of it is the building and 3/4 is just a parking lot. And he was talking about the people that choose to be green and ride a bike or walk or take an e-bike, that it's so dangerous for these huge highways to try and cross where someone's taking their big truck and turning into Walmart. Like, it's so incredibly dangerous for pedestrians. Like, I grew up in a pretty small city, but even when you get into the newer parts of the city in Prince George up by Walmart, it is dangerous. And my friends that live up there, like, I don't let my kids go to Walmart by themselves because I'm scared they're going to get hit by somebody, because it's not built for pedestrians at all. And it's not really economical, and it's not really, and I'm somebody that was raised by loggers, and we all drive big 1-ton diesel trucks, long boxes, and I'm gonna have a big service truck myself. But if I was working something downtown in an office, like I took the bus for years because why? I didn't need a car. I hated paying for parking. I loved taking the bus. It was great. It's not really, I can't get to where I need to go now without a vehicle, but I loved taking the bus. It was awesome. I could just get up and go about my day. I didn't have to worry about parking. I didn't have to have, parking passes or anything like that. The hospital, I didn't have to have parking passes. It was great.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the same stuff we see, we're kind of looking at and facing in Ontario as well, right? Angela, quick, and then we'll kind of make our way around Strong Woman as well after Angela. Then we'll do a round circle.
Sorry, when we have a moment, I also have some stats.
Oh, nice. Numbers. I like stats.
I can interrupt with that right now. And this is in regards to actually, in regards to the topic of 6.14%. One of the things that was kind of kicking in for me was, well, what were the previous two elections and what were the advanced polling numbers like there? So our current one is at 6.14%, and this is over a 3-day period. So everybody's saying that, well, this is the lowest number we've had. Well, let's put this in comparison. So the previous election was in 2022, and it was 9.92% of the voters over a 10-day period compared to a 3-day period.
Wow.
And then before that was in 2018, and it was at 6.8% cast over a 5-day advanced polling period. So 6.14, everybody's panicking about it, but I'm like, if you compare it to what we did previously, it's kind of on the mark. It's 3 days at 6.14, while 5 days they were 6.8, and then 10 days we were able to 9.92. So it's actually kind of on the mark. So now, is this going to mean that we're going to have a lot more people showing up at the polls on the 27th? Well, we hope so, but at least it's not everybody's going away. I'm not feeling that just yet.
Yeah,
that makes sense. I was asking a quick question: is there anyone on the panel that actually supports Doug Ford, or are we all against him?
I think at this point it's pretty much all against. I haven't heard from Strong Woman yet, but let's go with Angela, and then we hear from Strong Woman.
Okay, my concern is, first of all, I'm speaking to a lot of people, and they're still not going to the polls because you don't understand that this is an important election. You're talking about he's going to be in power for 4 more years, and that means the next election will be till 2029. Our healthcare system is in crisis. Beyond crisis. Emergency rooms are closing down. He's prioritizing our healthcare. And while, the Ministry of Health, what was her name again? Elliott, when she was in?
Okay.
So apparently there's some information that's out there stating that she was going for the American style of the healthcare, and she was trying to introduce that before she left. We should be concerned about these things because your provincial government deals with your everyday needs. They deal with your everyday needs. And my main concern is that people are going to these polls with federal issues in a provincial election. And we need to understand the difference between the two and how important this election is to us.
Yeah. Absolutely. And right. And a lot of people don't separate federal and provincial at this point. It's just camp-based voting, where if you're conservative, it's conservative across the board, regardless of what the actual policies and legislation would be. Strong Woman, did you want to chime in?
Sure. So I've been on here before. I was with you last week. I've kind of thought in the last couple of days that we're sort of on a bubble in this TikTok world because we are all, very vocal and we're talking about things, but it's those people who are not on TikTok or not really on social media where the conversations are going. I feel like those are the people that are still voting for Doug Ford. That is what I kind of think. I think that everyone here there's not too many. Of course, you get people that still say, but I canvassed for the Liberal person in my town. So I had like a breadth of experience where I was actually door knocking. And I got everything from, like, I went to a condo in the center of our town. It's not very big. It's mainly seniors. And they just didn't have a clue as to who was running. And therefore, there's not enough time for those people to make their decision because it's only been 30 days. And like in my particular town, the guy has been the MPP since 2016.
Wow.
So he has done nothing. I've actually, I don't want to go too hard on seniors at the door and say, he's basically a cheerleader, but I try to lead the conversation. But he doesn't really have a good resume. Like, in fact, if he came to you for a job with the resume that he has of his accomplishments, you wouldn't hire him. You know what I mean? Like, if he came to your facility and you wanted to hire him as a manager and he said, well, I basically stood behind and cheerleaded on, workers at the plant or whatever. Like, he hasn't done anything. So I got a mix. People were interested in listening to the candidate. I did get mixed feelings, cross bordering the federal and the liberal, type of what's going on. And then I don't want to vote liberal. And I guess it's going to have to be Doug. People don't really know about the NDP. Again, there's a bit of mistrust happening federally with the NDP, and everything cross borders, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? It bleeds into provincial. Like it can't be separated for a lot of people who are not really talking about politics like us folks on here all the time. They can't make that distinction. So I had my eyes open. I had people saying not interested. I think I would say 99% of the people that I door knocked were all polite. There was nobody that I reached was rude or, if they were conservative, they just said not interested. And, I didn't try to stick my foot in the door and try to change their minds. A lot of people aren't home. I mean, we worked hard. We were door knocking Saturdays, Sundays, weeknights. One of the things that I was happy to hear is that a lot of the condos and places for seniors all have voting in their buildings. So people will be going down tomorrow night in the condo. They will be building in there. It's set up for them there. They don't have to go out. That's what I found door knocking. Like when we went to the condos, when we went to seniors. So you're not going to get those people early voting. But I think today, like my candidate, he went to old age homes at the very last couple of days, like Amica and places like that, Amica, whatever, however you say it, like long-term or not long-term care, but retirement homes where it's going to be fresh in their mind. He gave them the card. Voting is tomorrow, but he ran into the Liberal MPP, canvassing as well. So, I mean, smart move, but everyone's thinking the same. But as far as smart voting, if you're not on TikTok, you don't really catch on to that. That's maybe where I was starting with that at the beginning. I find that kind of frustrating because it's like the people that are maybe 60 or 70, they're not on. I don't want to ageism here, but you know what I mean? Like the people that are not on TikTok, that are not seeing that in their feed, in the For You page, they're not on it. So they don't really know about smart voting. They think because they're not involved that why should I have to throw my vote to the NDP because we're in second place? I don't want to vote for NDP. I want to vote for Liberal, so they still can't even catch on. So that's kind of frustrating. I think that's where we're still seeing. My best hope, of course, in a perfect world, Doug Ford wouldn't win tomorrow. But my best hope is that he gets a minority. That's what I'm hoping. That's what I'm hoping.
And that's the thing. Like Doug Ford has fallen in the polls a bit over the last week or so, and the possibility of having a minority government is, I think, slim, but it still is a chance, and at least that way there's more checks and balances if they do end up with a minority. So I mean, that's really, as long as we can hit that line, I think we can consider it a bit of a win. I mean, we're hoping for more, of course, but
Can I ask, what is, probably Joe knows for sure, or you do, what is the magic number for a minority? How many seats is it? Is it 87?
I actually have that written down somewhere. I believe it's in the 70s or 80s.
Is it 70, 78, or maybe that's why I'm thinking 87. Maybe it's 78. That's
Yeah.
very reasonable. That's very reasonable. There are people where the races are really tight, like Hamilton, where it's like
Yeah.
37 for PC and 37 for Liberal, and people are catching on to the fact,
Yeah.
that
Joe, did you happen to find?
The NDP
So I got
needs
124 seats for the Legislative Assembly in there. So if we do a quick halving of that, that should be 62, 63 to get you the majority.
Okay.
Okay.
That's not
Just
bad.
confirming that.
It's doable.
It
Yeah.
is doable. It's all it's all doable if you can find the 63 seats. That's or at least knock off enough to be just under the 62. That's
Yeah.
all you need.
And just to kind of tie in for other people that are outside of Ontario, I want to make comparisons between different provinces as well, right? We saw in BC where the election happened there, and it was a close one, really was. And you've got the left that has kind of not a coalition, but I mean you've got the NDP and the Green that together make up the majority. So there's fight out of that. Conservatives were close though, as well as New Brunswick just had theirs in November, and they went from having majority to super majority. And now we're seeing what's happening in New Brunswick with the Conservative government essentially trying to consolidate power, get rid of checks and balances, get rid of their Auditor General, or get the ability to fire the Auditor General for really no apparent reason, just because they're in a bad mood, and getting rid of public inquiries, being able to just restrict information completely if they were to do that with the Auditor General. And it's telling because Alberta is doing the same thing as well, right? They've been making legislation, putting through legislation to cut things for oversight, cut things for essentially making it, information readily available to the public. If Ontario happens to go the same way, you might see the same sort of legislation and policy. We're already seeing it in Ontario on a smaller level. But again, if they get that supermajority, there's no telling what they do, especially with what we're seeing in provinces across the country.
Yeah, I voted tonight because in my town, it wasn't even early election. It was a one poll place that was open. And it was quite lined up, but we didn't have to wait. But it was people wanting to get out there, tonight beforehand. And it was pretty good. And I don't know, I'm hoping for the best. Did you see that the Premier in Newfoundland gave up? And last week, the PEI Premier gave up. I mean...
Okay, do you find a pattern here that's happening with all the premiers? You find that it's before the federal election, or they're making these decisions, even though they say it's tariffs?
The premier in Newfoundland said he just couldn't be the premier and be fighting basically going like
exactly what the other one said as well.
I have a bit of a background in regards to to add to context to the premier of Newfoundland. What people may not be aware of is he was one term. He started at the beginning of COVID, and now coming up to the end of it, it's around this time that they would do that because Newfoundland has a 5-year window. Now, this particular premier had a significant amount of struggles because he came in 2020, right at the beginning of COVID. Being a medical doctor himself, he was trying to administer and assist, but he had a fair amount of pushback, as we saw in all the provinces across the nation in regards to anti-vaxxers, anti-lockdowns, anti-mask mandates, you name it, we saw it. I'm in Ottawa, I saw it firsthand here. So we had a fair amount. He also had, in particular, there was charges laid against two individuals, one by the name of Dana Raven Metcalf, the other one I believe was their partner, and of actual harassment where they drove a convoy all the way to this premier's house to just harass him, and they were eventually charged. The charges were dropped, but I figured this might, even though they haven't mentioned this, between this and everything else going on, he might have found that this is a lot more than him and his family can handle, and they decided, you know what, I'm gonna go back to law practice. Sorry, to medical practice.
Yeah, I could see that. I could very much see that exhausting. It's just sort of like you're not ready to keep the fight going, especially when you're going with someone as kind of crazy as Trump, right? Like, I don't want to bother.
We had two snap elections, right? There was New Brunswick, right? And what's the other one again? New Brunswick, and what's the other one that they had a snap election with?
Was it Nova Scotia? Nova Scotia.
Nova Scotia, is it?
Nova Scotia had a snap. That's where they ended up with the supermajority. Is it?
Oh yeah, because that's right. So and then plus Ford now.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, they're taking advantage of doing that sort of thing. Coop, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to comment that yes, I am a conservative, and but the one lady said that she hopes that Ford would be reduced to a minority government to have checks and balances in place, and I am absolutely fine with that. Absolutely fine with that.
Yeah.
I don't want him. I don't agree with everything he does, and I do agree with some of the things he does do, but I do believe that reducing the power and having the checks and balances in place is a really good idea for pretty well every government.
Yeah.
And no coalitions. I don't think coalition should be forced to work together to do what's best for everybody overall and not just one straight agenda. And that goes for federal as well as provincial politics.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Can I ask you a question?
Who, me?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
How much do you trust Doug Ford in what he says? Like in relation, let's talk specifically in relation to the states and the tariff. I mean, sometimes I feel like we're being gaslit by Doug Ford, like he's trying to blow us up and try to tell us that, he's going to, like there's so many of these things that he says he's going to do, with the Starlink and all this stuff. And then it goes back on the table and it's like, he's taking booze off the shelf that's U.S. and then it goes back on. It's like, I would have just left it off, first of all. I think he would have been like, I'm not, Doug Ford supporter, but I would have been like, hell yeah, I'm taking a stand. It's not going back. I
think he's huffing and puffing a lot.
Okay.
I think the Starlink thing, canceling that Starlink contract, I think that's a bad idea. And I will explain it. And I know some people may or may not agree with me. Telstat, which is the Canadian alternative to Starlink for people way, way up north that have no other choice, Telstat's not even anywhere near ready yet. They haven't even launched satellites yet. And the problem is, even if you cancel that contract and say, okay, let's fast track Telstat and get it going so people in rural areas can have high-speed internet and just plain internet access, period, is that unfortunately we need Elon Musk to launch those satellites because there's nobody else that can do it. So I think that one is a kind of a bad idea because you're going to cut off rural or not like remote communities like Moosonee, and I'm not saying that that's what they use there, but I'm sure that that's probably is what they're using because there's just nothing else that's any good. I lived rural for a while and I had XploreNet and it was horrible service. Horrible service.
I will agree with that XploreNet is awful. And being up here where we just did the pipeline and we've got tons of logging shows, for the GPS on modern equipment to cut grade and everything like that, they do really heavily rely on Starlink, very, very heavily. So I'm not saying that I support Elon or Starlink, and I feel bad for taxpayers that have to subsidize the crap out of Elon, but there has to be an alternative because on an industrial level, not just a residential level, on a massive industrial, we're talking about creating satellite cities and building roads. A lot of people rely on Starlink for the GPS in their equipment. The guy across from me, I've been dog sitting, and he was home 2 hours early. I'm like, what are you doing here? And he goes, well, they're trying to put this stupid Starlink on my new grader, and it's not working. I can't get it to talk to the module. So it's just something that people use, but we need to start having competition in Canada and in the world in general. It can't just be these massive subsidized billionaires taking everything over. And usually it's an inferior product. If someone's cornering the market and they have to corner the market, it's because they can't compete, Pookie. Like that's capitalism, sink or swim. It shouldn't be corporate welfare. You should have a superior product. Like you can do Edison Motors is not going very quickly, but look at that guy. He is doing some fantastic things. And
He's amazing.
The business ethics of, I'm so proud to call him a BCer, because he has turned down so many buyouts and offers. And that guy says, nope, I want to stay in Canada and I want to do it the right way. And we could do it, but I mean, I don't know anything about satellites, and that's not kind of my jam, but there's got to be more competition in Canada. I think all the tariffs and pulling American product off the shelf is just going to bottleneck that. It's just going to bottleneck that monopoly, and we have to find a long-term solution for this, because it's crazy. We're getting inferior product, less amount at a higher price, and we're still subsidizing it. It's insane.
Yeah, I love what he did with Edison Motors. I mean, that's totally amazing. And I wish in my industry, because the equipment is so specialized, like the transport truck that I'm driving right now is $500,000. The new one I just ordered, $675,000 for a truck and a trailer.
It's still diesel.
Yeah,
diesel.
yeah, and I literally the engineers at my company were, because they're certified to work on our own equipment.
Yeah.
They looked into the aspect of, okay, can we modify a Tesla truck? And it would take probably $500,000 to modify a Tesla to be able to do the job that we do.
Because Chase is really big on, because that was the whole thing, is that he was raised by truckers, right? He was in the trucking industry, and he wanted things to be off the shelf. You can fix it yourself. You know, it's not like John Deere where you have to go into the dealership. So do you know what it would look like to do a retrofit with some of Chase's gear? Because that's my biggest thing, as someone that was raised by a logging contracting family, is I think about guys with trucks. They can't all go buy brand new EVs and totally start fresh. There's no way. There's absolutely no way they could hold. They're struggling now. They could not hold down payments on $2 million trucks and start fresh. So I don't know what retrofitting looks like. I don't know what your industry is or what you drive, but I mean, it's not a terrible thing to look into retrofitting in the future. And it's new technology, and it's just like drones. They've gotten cheaper over the last 10 years. That technology will get cheaper over time, and he'll start to kind of fine tune everything, right?
Yeah, I drive car. I have 3 car transporters.
Oh, right on, cool.
Yeah, yeah. Sweet. So transport new cars going north, used cars coming back. Yeah, the equipment's terribly expensive. It's only made in Georgia. There's no Canadian manufacturers for our equipment.
When you're that specialized, yeah, you kind of have to go with a bigger player, right?
And I mean, and Cottrell, that is our supplier for our equipment. I mean, they're the best. So,
right on.
As far as retrofitting, because everything's so tight, because we've got decks where we put cars and everything. Retrofitting, and I mean, like I said, our engineers at our company, we're a 100-truck company, mostly owner operators, and they said, like a Tesla truck, impossible, absolutely impossible.
Are you guys running cab overs or no?
Probably no, not. Oh God, no. I've got I've got a Western Star. All 3 of my trucks are Western Stars, nice. And we got like the where you have the car on top of the roof of the vehicle or on top of the transport. Like, to do that with a Tesla truck, you would have to cut that roof off, re-engineer that whole roof line so it's strong, and then they actually sit too high, so we would never be able to cut the roof off enough to be able to put a vehicle up there and be under height.
Yeah, and when you start to talk about full EV versus diesel electric, as someone where it gets, minus 60, almost 70 with the wind chill, after watching that debacle in Edmonton, I think it was last winter with those EV buses, diesel electric makes a lot more sense to me for now with the
hybrid, absolutely, yeah.
Because I mean, it's 2.5 hours to the nearest town here, and if it was, say, a diesel ambulance or a bus, we have a lot of seniors in like northern BC. There's all these little tiny communities, and people take these buses to get to cancer appointments and all of these things. I wouldn't put my parents in a full EV bus in the middle of winter. And there's no service. I'd be absolutely terrified to do that. So for me, the diesel and equipment as well, like I've been out in the bush at minus 40 or trying to start a loader at minus 40. Maybe it didn't snow for a couple of days, and it's hard even with starter fluid and jumping back.
I'm here in Ontario.
Diesel. Oh my God, trying to start them.
Be burnt to the ground.
That too, they're not safe. Absolutely. They're not reliable yet. We're just not there. Diesel electric, I think, is great. I think it's awesome.
Right, so I'm gonna pause conversation for a second, and then once I get done doing a bit of a recap here, we'll hear from See You Next Tuesday, and we'll get into doing the group conversation again. So, guys, we've made it through the first hour of our 24-hour marathon. We're doing the politics.
Oh,
We just got things going. We've made it through the first hour, guys. We got 23 more to go.
Oh my
It's
goodness.
going to be great. You've got me for another 2 hours, and then Pixie takes over after myself, and she'll have the next 3-hour leg, and so on and so forth. So,
I
guys,
got my diaper on. Let's go.
don't forget to keep tapping that like button. Share the stream. Let people know that we're here. We really appreciate it. We do have some live goals going if you feel compelled. They are there as well. We've got the little golden heart there. If you want to become a part of our team as we're going forward, do that as well. If you go to our link tree on our profile, we also have a link that if you guys feel compelled to help us at Beaver Politics grow, you can go and donate there if you feel compelled. It's not mandatory. Not everyone can either, so we take that into account. But we really appreciate all the support from everyone. So all that being said, guys, see you next Tuesday. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome. I've always enjoyed your shows. Good topics, good people for the majority. But yeah, we were talking about those EVs when you guys were talking about EVs when I jumped in.
Yep.
And it was here in Huntsville, Ontario, about a month ago. One of those EV school buses totally completely engulfed, and they saved all the kids, but the bus was a total loss.
And I bet
And it's a very common problem. You get these e-bikes and e-bicycles, and I read an article where around North America, in the last 2 years, the instances of home fires has doubled because people want more, faster, customize them, do whatever they want, and they charge them at home, and they can bring a bicycle in the house, and that's what's happening. They're catching fire in a home. So we even had a cottage with the DeWalt and Milwaukee batteries charging overnight, and it was a total loss. The place was burnt to the ground. So they're not, any piece of machinery can break down at any given time.
Oh, you
And
bet.
I don't really think there's a fail safe for this stuff. They need to incorporate some kind of cell to put these batteries in if they're going to go that way. So if it does catch fire, it doesn't go past that cell, but then it's another cost. So
They're probably
contain some kind of container.
I bet someone's working. We don't know about patents. I bet someone's 5 years into a patent for that, and we'll see in 10 years, and we don't even know. You know what I mean?
Most, I guess, like most of the EV implementations don't have that problem anymore. For example, like my plug-in hybrid, the battery in it is not a single unit. Most of them are actually multiple units that are built up for exactly that point. There is something called lithium runaway, and this is when a drain on a lithium battery goes excessively fast, and it could be because of something like heating or overpowering. And most commonly, people saw that in the the Note 7 from Samsung phones that came out quite a few years back, and these things would kind of just spontaneously go on fire. Those are single units. Now they've gone to compartmentalizing them to make them individual. The other thing right now to watch for, which is a huge leap that they're working on, is sodium based, and they found a solution to make sodium based as opposed to lithium ion. This should be a game changer for two facts. One, it should at least address the lithium ion runaway so you don't have that stability problem. And two, they're capable of containing twice as much power in the same amount of size, which is a huge changer because it now makes it, it actually brings it even closer to, we are now dealing with a vehicle that can probably go as far as fuel-based, or if not further because of it.
Well, that's cool. I just hope that the cost offset will actually come down. Then it will actually force the diesel manufacturers to bring their costs down.
Well, sodium based is made from salt as compared to lithium. This is also a huge difference because suddenly those needs for rare minerals is gone. If you got an ocean, start desalinating, you got fresh water, and you've got salt to make those batteries.
Do you still get the same power?
Do we know about in the cold?
Twice as much power.
I haven't read. How are they in the cold, Joe? I haven't heard much about the sodium batteries.
They're still in development right now. They just found that sodium batteries has been around for quite a while, but the problem with them is that they weren't stable because of the way that the electrons were firing across. It caused a gumming of a gumming on the cathode node, I think it was, and it would just cause it to stop working rather after a couple of usages. So it just was non-viable. But they found a new way to do it so that it doesn't cause that effect now. And so they're working on that and refining it. And it's probably going to be within the next 5-10 years, if everything goes well, we're going to start seeing these things come to market. And these things are going to come to market faster because they don't need to get lithium mines. They don't need to get any of the other mines. They just literally just need to go find salt. And let's be honest here, that ain't hard to find in this world.
Who's that speaking? Is it Coop?
Oh, sorry,
No.
I coughed.
Who is it?
Coop Copt, I'm the one speaking. I'm Joe.
Oh, okay, Joe. I'm not a battery expert, but I notice in the cold they don't like to work very much. And is it the molecular theory, like they shrink, so they're not as active?
I think
It's not that they don't like to work as much. It's cold has an effect on electrical circuits. One of the reasons, the very effects that makes batteries not work as well in the cold is also the same thing that makes hyper rails work really, really well. It's because the colder the temperature, the more conductivity there is, and therefore the more it can either be drained in case of battery,
Yeah.
or have higher power when it comes to magnets.
So I noticed
it's
with draining, just even in a simple
Yeah.
thing like a vape, you could have like
Yeah.
30%, but if it's in the cold, like if I keep it in my tool pouch, it won't even work.
Yeah.
But you
Yeah.
go inside, you hold it in your hand for a couple of minutes, and it's right back to normal.
Yep. And it's just the cold has an effect. It's I'm not sure if they're going to have the same problem with the sodiums. I would assume so. It's so far every single technology when it comes to the cold, whether it be lithium, alkaline, everything else. Electronics has a problem with the cold. It's just a difference in temperature.
Well, the
They also have a
reactors
problem with heat too. That's why they have every device you have has a sort of a temperature range. Even my doorbell camera says
Yeah.
it shouldn't work in the Canadian winter. Luckily, it does. But
my glucometer doesn't work in the cold. I have to stick it sometimes. I have to stick my
Yep.
case in the little heating grate on my loader because it won't turn on. I'm like, yeah, but I really need to check my sugars right now. So we need to function here.
do you want a quick solution for that?
Hmm.
Get a bunch of those hot pockets.
Yep.
This is
I
a
was
trick
gonna
that
say that.
photographers use and camera guys. I've got video equipment. I keep this stuff around. So when
Oh,
I take my big
I know all
camcorder,
about them. I know
They
all
work
about
slap
on
a
knees
little
and
hot
elbows
shot in
pretty
there and you're
good
good to
too.
go.
The thing is that where I keep my insulin, the insulin can't be hot. So that's where it comes into place and I'm running a 908. It's not like I'm in a big excavator or a truck at all. Just roll out all my lunch kit in my purse and my bag. I've got about a 18-inch by 11-inch spot where my stuff can go. So I kind of have to keep the heat in the cab not too hot. Even if I have the cab too hot, it'll kill my insulin and it doesn't work. So I'm kind of stuck in that happy medium where I'd rather have a slightly cool glucometer I can heat than insulin that's toast for the next 12, 14 hours and then I'm screwed, right?
Well, I'm a
Why don't
carpenter
you keep
outside, and everything hits about minus 20, and then it becomes problematic. Like a nail gun, like a pass load with the gas
Yeah.
cartridges, they
Yeah.
start to freeze up. You
Or
know, you're
Milwaukee
just keep
battery.
your insulin on the outside of the truck.
I, I don't think
Throw it
you're
on the
aware of what I
manifold.
do. I plow a ton of industrial areas out in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night. I can't just put
I'm
stuff
not saying
there
put
where
it
I
in
want in
front of the
truck.
plow. I'm just saying, somewhere on the outside of the cab.
You haven't run articulated equipment, have you? It's very bouncy, my friend.
I
It's a
can't even
cute
spell
idea.
articulate.
It reminds me of when they told me that I should use the continuous glucose monitoring system, and it had to be on the top of my belly or the back of my arm. And when I tried to explain that a suicide knob is a thing, and I put my arm over my seat every 5 minutes to back up because I'm plowing between trucks, I popped off 3 sensors in an hour, and I go, that cost me $500. Well, my friend runs a truck, and I don't run a truck, sweetheart. I run a loader. I run a wheel loader. It's got a suicide knob that constantly smashes into my belly, and I put my arm over my seat to back up because I don't have a backup cam, and my mirrors are totally covered in mud. So it's a nice idea, but until you run articulated, it's like saying strap it to your skidder. Well, that's going to be gone. And I've lost glucometers. They've rolled out the bottom of the door or bounced out the window, and I've never found them again. I've had stuff bounce right out my window because I'm smashing 2 feet in the air. So it's a nice thought, but until you run articulated equipment, it bucks like a mechanical bull for 12 hours. That is not going to work. And you can't just attach things. I'm not out there with a welder just attaching brackets to this rented equipment either. I can't modify rented equipment either. So Not
So,
my
so,
gear.
Good,
I'm a
but they're not gonna
millennial.
like
I
it.
don't own my equipment. I wish. That's cute. I don't own the equipment, so.
so tying that into the Ontario election and everything over here, that's one thing. Coming back to the Ring of Fire I mentioned earlier, where that sort of stuff has to be taken into account when you're coming up to the north to create infrastructure, create roads, create businesses,
Yep.
and the mining operations themselves. Like you have to think about the cold weather and temperatures and the effect it has on the equipment. You're going to be looking at higher maintenance costs.
Well, we never even established a limit in Ontario. It was back in about 1995. There was a baker here in Barrie at Chrissa Bakery. It was like 106 degrees, like the temperature, ambient temperature outside, and he was working in the bakery and died. So it became the talk of the news at that time, and no, but they could not set upper limit for temperature. So 102 is crazy, especially when you're inside. You're I was welding at the time.
Yeah.
You're gasping for oxygen.
ACU, are you in Barrie right now?
Yes. So
Oh,
what is
okay.
it? What
I'm
is it
going
for
through Barrie
freezing
right now.
temperatures?
Right on.
Oh, are you going to Barrie?
I know I'm passing through Barrie right now. I'm just coming
Oh,
up to
right on.
Mayfield Street.
Do you know what the best thing to come out of Barrie is?
No.
Highway 11.
Yeah. Yep. No, I just left North Bay a couple hours ago.
We
I'm just
had
coming
so
back
much
from
snow here a
Timmins.
week ago. We didn't even know
Oh
where we
no,
were going to put it.
I know you did. I went to I trucked north and I went to Wawa, which has received about 600 centimeters of snow this season.
You guys
Have
got
you
all
been
my
out Georgian Bay,
snow.
Tiny Beaches way, out through Elmvale?
Yeah.
After that 3-day melt we had, the snow is still above the road signs.
No, I try not to go that way over
No.
towards Collingwood, Owen Sound. I stay the hell away from north of London. I just
Yeah.
stick to my Timmins, Wawa, Sault Ste. Marie, Kapuskasing. I just go north. Less traffic, less
up north
BS.
even get much snow?
They have open snowmobile trails, and ours opened for 5 days down in Tillsonburg where I live, and
Like
now
my
they're closed
driveway's
again.
bare now. Like my
Yeah.
driveway's completely bare.
Yeah.
Where a week ago there was like probably a 4-inch layer.
You guys got all my snow. I'm over here doing snow removal work in less than like 10 days a month, and you guys
Bring your
I
truck,
got
you can
6
have
feet.
it.
I'm like, wow, we got like 6 inches this month. I'm like, bring it, take it to BC. I'll take it all, man. I'll take a foot a day until March.
Well, spring's been back in the spring is like been in the air for the last 2-3 days. Beautiful sunshine, but
Now-
we're gonna dip back down to minus 11 in a day.
Yeah, it's been like plus 5 here for a week. It's all melting and raining
Plus
right now.
5, holy
It was
shnikey!
minus 30 a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, and it's been over zero at night for almost a week now. Like it went from minus 30 to plus 5 in a few days, and it's just it's
Minus
actually
30 is crazy.
well, and there's a really nice contractor here in town. I plow in another town. I'm actually driving back and forth to plow with because I like the contractor better. But in town here, the guy it's a small city. I live in Mackenzie. I don't care. And so the guy owns a lot of the property, and he does his own snow removal and sanding. And what happened is he's too cheap to load his snow out. So underground is still frozen because it was minus 30, and all of the drains have overflowed because it's melting these 20-foot piles, 20 feet high by 20 feet deep by 40 feet long in these big mall parking lots. And there's like 6 inches of solid ice, and it's just absolute ice rink right now. And you can sand it all you want, but the water runs over the top, melts it, and runs the sand off. So he's just out sanding. I can see him because I applied for that job, but my class 3 and my air brakes are expired. So he took somebody else. Well, now he's doing it himself, and he's out sanding. I see him all the time. He's just sanding. I'm like, why don't you get your truck and load the snow out? Like this
all the
cannot
plow
be
guys
cheaper.
around here are complaining now because they're over their contracts and it's all out of pocket.
Yeah, welcome to life. That's how snow removal goes, man. You can't, and it's not even a bad year. I mean, for you guys, it is. For us, we haven't had a good year since 2021, 2022. I mean, I worked, I think, 23 days solid. I worked every single day, and I was pulling 14s. They let me pull a couple. I wasn't supposed to. I was like, just throw it on my next check. Let's just bury these guys.
I'm surprised you guys aren't following the Ottawa pattern. A lot of the snowplow operators here have a cap. If you go up to 253 millimeters, I think it is, because we have it here with our condo, anything above, we pay extra. So it's this way you don't get screwed in regards to a massive snowfall. This was
Yeah.
because I think it was like 2008 here in Ottawa. We had a massive year where just so much snow fell that, yeah, snowplow guys started losing money. They said, yep, next year
I don't
we
think
hit
the
this cap.
smaller
That's
guys
what
are
it is.
doing
We
that
just do
cap.
I do industrial, so we just do flashpoints. So I do a bunch of Banstra and trucking yards and a bunch of industrial areas. So I don't do any residential whatsoever, which I'm fine with. I do it at night. I'm happy with it. So we have a 2-inch
Same
flash.
problem, though.
If it well, they can afford it and they don't care. They would rather if you can make it that night, and if we don't make it and there's 6 inches, I'll run out there and I'll put it in high gear and I'll punch lane so the trucks can get out, and I'll show up at 6 the next day and I'll start punching away at it again. And we get snow to a point where I can leave I can start a site at 7 o'clock at night, and by the time I leave at 12, there's already 6 inches where I started. And it's just a reality that they have to put up with. But it's better than having a foot and a half where the trucks can't get out, right?
So if you want to have some interesting video, Ottawa yesterday, last night to be specific, yesterday morning around 5 o'clock in the morning. I think Moose knows what I'm talking about. A garage in downtown Ottawa collapsed. One section of it.
Oh no!
They're attributing it to an excessive amount of snow. There were about 4 to 5 feet of wet snow that's been stacked there.
Starbucks in Midland, a building 2 years old, collapsed. Starport Marina in Aurelia, 30 bays of boats collapsed. There was another building downtown Aurelia collapsed. A big old building in Rama collapsed. Yeah, it was heavy snow loads after 2 days of melting.
As someone that's taking my heavy duty mechanics, I'm obligated to blame the engineers. We have to. It's part of our code. I have to blame the engineers. It's part of my brotherhood. No, but
I'm a carpenter and I sheet roofs. All it takes is to miss some H clips in between a 2-foot span on a truss, and it starts to belly, pulls on the nails. Next thing you know, you got to collapse.
Yeah, this one's going to be.
Construction can get
There's
really
going to be a lot of investigations for the one that was in downtown Ottawa, because they said like they were seeing I-beams and they were watching the concrete pillars starting to be crushed down. They evacuated the building, and within 12 hours, they finally saw that section collapse. And they're right now working on plans, and they're starting to demolish it section by section because the rest of the structure is no longer safe. And there's still 50 vehicles in that structure, last I heard.
When I was working at a recycling plant here a few years ago, I used to I trained loader operators during the day, and then I'd jump in the loader at night and plow. And I show up groggy the next morning on my 3 hours of sleep, and I have a guy that was coming in. He was the trainer, right? And we had new people. So before I took his position, every time I jumped in that loader, I noticed it was in high gear and no diff lock on. And I'm like, that's kind of sketchy when you're riding up piles of cardboard, but hey, I'm was fairly new. I'm not going to say anything. And I watched this operator trainer that had been doing this for 30 years. That was like the top trainer, and he smashed into a concrete piling and the steel beam that supported the building. And I was in the workroom and I'm getting my radio and I'm talking with everybody, where's everybody going to be today? Who am I training today? Or who am I helping today? Cause I was still new. And we hear a bang and we thought a gas main had gone. We're like, oh my God. And this guy, he smashed in the whole counterweight. The hood was all bunched in. He smashed a bunch of hoses out and he almost took out that entire building while we were in it. And it was like, after that, I go into the lunchroom and there's like kind of a safety board. And I go, you never need to be in high gear, have your diff lock on. And all it took is our heavy duty mechanic there had sent it to the manager of kind of our DM, the district manager. And I was the new trainer like that day. I'm like, oh, because I just got a raise because I know how to use a diff lock. I mean, you think if you're doing it for 30 years and running articulated equipment, you should know what a diff lock is. But hey, and then I talked to the guy, the heavy duty mechanic. He says, in our district, we have had 3 loaders and one guy had a severe spinal injury from it, and they've blown, I think he said, 2 hydraulic pumps from it because they're running it in high gear with no diff lock all day, just cranking it up on a hill on an incline and smashing into everything in high gear. And I'm like, who is running this place? Like, this is terrifying. Who is running this show? It was scary. It's scary the level that you don't know how uneducated really people are.
If you had gone up to 400 about a month ago, we had some bad storms out that way. and you could tell the new truckers to the people that knew how to drive, because they were missing the road totally. Like you had to drive in the passing lane, off the rumble strip or the top of the snowbank. And these guys were like coming into corners and totally missing the road, and they'd be like way off into the rhubarb. It's like, how do you even do that?
They're not aware of offset. They're the little thing called offset that they're not using.
Oh, I couldn't drive a sharp stick up a dead dog's ass.
Yeah, and that's the thing with the amount of like Amazon packages and the amount of just trucking now that people are going out certified, but I don't think they have the confidence and experience when weather conditions aren't ideal. Like I'm lucky up here; it's really
not when they've only been in Canada for 2 winters.
Yeah, and you know what? It's
not necessarily a way to look at it, though. I mean, that's.
I could show you people who've been in Canada for 50 years and still don't have a clue how to drive a winter.
So it really doesn't.
I was going to say, I get around in my 01 Cavalier, and I get around just fine. So I don't know what people are doing. I see people with they've got like fully locking wheel hubs. They've got 4-wheel drive. It's a good sized pickup, and they're in the ditch.
I don't know how old you are. I'm 54 years old, and I can remember the 70s and the 80s. This was your typical winter, and everything was rear-wheel drive back then.
Yeah, not power steering too. Power steering on one of those rigs, and they're all manual. You betcha.
But time on the road doesn't equate to ability to drive in conditions, right? Guys, I want to shift a little bit. I think we're going to start at the top. And we're going to get back into the Ontario politics side of things. So what I want to do is start at the top with Strong Woman, and we'll work our way down. What's the key issues that you're looking for in this election in Ontario? And who do you think is the one to bring change or bring that to the forefront for you? So Strong Woman, start us off with that. I think Strong Woman's gone on a break. So Joe, let's move our way through.
So the strong issues. I mean, obviously, right now, the strong issues I want to see is definitely in regards to response to the American, the American threats. It's one that's kind of hard to ignore. I also want to see one that's sincere, not one that's right now that's there to undermine. And this is obviously something I see with Doug in regards to, I'm going to be tough on the Americans as I give them $500 million worth of contract money right now, between everything else that's going on. I obviously, I want to see a actual effort towards the healthcare system, because money has been thrown at it from the federals to the provincial, and in Ontario, it just seems to disappear and go somewhere else. Like maybe Staples, or blue license plates. So, there's definitely in regards to the healthcare, it's going to be something that affects, at least I see that affecting us all. I do want to see some more progressiveness in regards to, trying to get some better payout to help out the labor, but also mostly right now, definitely in regards to healthcare, more sincerity in regards to our actions towards the U.S. And there was a third one I wanted to get. We're also trying to get some more a restoration of our green work for green initiatives that we had on the consumer level, as well as the business level, in regards to working and having better incentives to retrofit your house or get an EV car or whatever it is. Having more programs into this than just sort of ignoring it altogether, which is what we seem to be getting from Doug. Just me.
Absolutely, yeah. Strong Woman, are you back? Let's see if you're kicking around now.
Yep, I'm here.
There you go. So we're just going through, as an Ontario voter, what are the key issues that you're voting on or want to see change in Ontario?
Well, I made a post yesterday. I did get it. I don't know from where, but it was a screenshot of the party's platforms, what they wanted to do on healthcare. Mm-hmm. And Doug really hadn't said anything. And honestly, like, I have a dad that's 89 years old. He's alive and well, thank goodness. But I have been in a situation where my husband got very, very sick. He had over 50 strokes in 2019. It was before COVID. He almost died of septic shock later that year. But I just wanted to let you know that I'm not saying that for any other reason, that I have experienced a real need at the hospital and to really access the hospital for different reasons during one year. And I can't imagine my 89-year-old dad being in the hallway and being so sick. I can't imagine that, you know, that people can't get the care in this province that they need. And I'm totally against privatizing healthcare and totally against it. We don't need to. Doug is creating this need to have private health care because he's made it so terrible for public health care. And I don't want to repeat myself, but the other night I said the main thing is that, Tommy Douglas, who was Kiefer Sutherland's grandfather, who started universal health care, he started it out west. It was to create a level playing field for all of us to have access to healthcare, to set us like other countries in the world. We can't compare ourselves to the States and say, oh, well, they pay for everything, blah, blah, blah. There are many countries around the world who have universal healthcare like that, where people have the same. I just saw actually a post where it said all of the people that went into debt or bankrupt because they paid for health care. And every country like Finland, Sweden, Canada was 0, 0, 0. People don't become, in debt because they're accessing health care. In the United States, it was 326,000 people who are in debt due to health care. And that could be anything from just even having a baby. So, I mean, God forbid if anything happens to your baby or your child needs treatment or, your parents. So I feel like I don't want to see, I only want to bring back healthcare to where it was or improve it. There's no reason why people can't have a family doctor. I mean, even here, in Ontario, I had a walking clinic that I accessed regularly, and then Doug put a stop to that, where only in the building, if you went to the doctor in the building, my family doctor wasn't in there, you could only access the walking clinic from 5 p.m. until 8 p.m. He changed it, right? Because of things that the Ontario healthcare they put into place, that you had to access a doctor. They put a sign. They said you can't come there. So like if I wake up in the morning and I feel like I have strep throat and my family doctor can't see me because it's appointments weeks in advance, I was able to go to that walk-in clinic, get a swab and get penicillin and get home, start feeling better. Now I got to wait till 5 o'clock at night. But then of course everyone else is waiting till 5 o'clock at night and until 8. So it's jam packed. You got to get there. I mean, I just feel that it's unforgivable healthcare to deteriorate it and chop away at that for the citizens of Ontario. I think it's terrible. So that's number one. And number two, education. Kids are being asked to do so much more with so much less. I work in education. I know the value of an EA or an ECE in that classroom. I've been on strike because of Doug Ford. I got $1 more an hour. $1. What is $1 doing for me? Butter is freaking $7.99. Like $1. It used to be $4.99 all the time. And the thing is $1 does nothing. That is, I'll tell you, I work 35 hours a week, so that was $35. $35 less tax. That's nothing. A raise. Oh, my phone died.
There you go. Yeah, and definitely important, guys, especially when we're talking about healthcare, like they mentioned as well. Joe mentioned earlier. It's the underfunding to the public sector of healthcare and making up the difference by paying private healthcare. In some cases, double what they were paying or are paying the public sector to do the same procedures. So that's where we're seeing definitely hemorrhaging of money and seeing it pretty much being, for lack of better words, pissed away. Angela, you're up. What's key points for you?
Yeah, the main thing always is our healthcare system and the fact the emergency rooms are closing down. And, like myself and so many, we've lost our positions because they're leaving the field. Because honestly, who's going to work for $37.97, right? And that's what they get per visit. Now, we know it's a family practice, right? But they have a lot of factors involved that they have to pay out of their own pocket, right? As well as all the mountain paperwork. So I lost my family doctor as a result. I spoke to her to find out what the concern was. And so basically she went into privatization. The privatization, as much as she loved her patients, she couldn't maintain, right? And second of all, for me, it's the most vulnerable people in our community in Ontario. And I'm speaking about social services, as well as I also have a son who's on the spectrum. He's an adult now. He's in a group home right now. And as if you're aware that Jake's house, which was a house for individuals with intellectual and physical disabilities, the Ministry of Children, Youth, and Social Services cut their funds, and as a result, they closed their doors. So it's the most vulnerable people that may be affected by this.
No, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. It's a lot of this stuff. I'm in a northern Ontario community, right? And a lot of the smaller communities up here, unfortunately, even in the one I'm in, the schools can't afford, because of cuts to education sector, they can't afford the EAs and different resources that they're supposed to have for kids that need those resources. And I know a couple kids who are autistic and are supposed to have those extra resources, but they've been thrown into the normal classes with absolutely no resources to help them to move forward with things when that's essentially what they need. And you pointed out that Doug Ford and the Conservatives have cut quite a bit, leading to the quality of our education system going down the tube. Great point. See you next Tuesday. What about you? What are key factors?
Well, I could go down so many different rabbit holes with what's going on in our country, but well, I'd have to say we need to start with the immigration problem. I know it's a federal agenda. Our country can handle 400,000 immigrants a year, right? For the tax base, for our public sector, for health, the hospitals, the beds, jobs, homes, housing. So what we've been experiencing the last little while is careless spending at the federal level, where they have to bring in the immigrants to offset the population with the money they borrowed from the banks.
Hold on a second right there, because when you're talking about this sort of
What's that?
That actually sets immigration levels in the provinces are the province, because they negotiate with the federal government to allow what they need in terms of skilled trade workers or healthcare workers or whatever the case may be that the province needs. They negotiate that with the federal government, but it's essentially determined by the province in that sense. And when it comes to health, you mentioned healthcare in there as well.
Well, the students that have come into the country under false pretenses, with
Stop again. What do you mean false pretenses?
Well, schools that don't even exist, and they have the paperwork to get temporary student visas, and then they're overstaying the visas, so they need jobs, they need housing.
So I'm going to stop you there for a second. I'm going to stop you right there, because when it comes to visas, whether it's a work visa or a student visa, right, they get those legally and come here. Now, again, that's a provincial thing, because when you're talking about especially students coming from other countries, they come, the province negotiates that as well with the federal government, because the Ontario government under Doug Ford has relied on the fact that we get international students, because those international students aren't subsidized by the government or any sort of OSAP or anything like that. So it brings that extra revenue into the province without the province really having to pay much out for that revenue to come in.
Right. So the state makes the money, but we, the people that are already here that rely on the services for everyday functioning in our lives, get diminished, with the
It
overpopulation.
doesn't get diminished. How does our services get diminished by international students?
So, well, not just the students, just immigration numbers completely, because that overloads the hospitals.
Okay,
We
so
just had the COVID pandemic, and all those nurses and doctors that didn't get the shot got let go. They didn't get hired back.
Hold on. Healthcare. Okay, let's talk about healthcare here, because when Doug Ford first got elected, okay, and I've been through this already on this live, and I'm just going to point it out again. When Doug Ford first got elected, within his first 6 to 8 months, made massive tens of millions of dollars worth of cuts to our healthcare sector. And again, as I pointed out a little bit earlier, he's been paying private healthcare sector sometimes double to make up the difference within procedures and surgeries. Why is he paying private healthcare double than he would the public sector? All that is hemorrhaging money and putting money outside the public sector. That's where the fall is short is, because he's not actually funding the public sector properly and getting the proper resources and people in place. That's why the healthcare system is crumbling. That has nothing to do with anyone that comes to Canada and also needs healthcare, which is a basic human right and need.
Well, yeah, but if the population goes up, then
No. You can't say, well, yeah, but. No. It's a basic human right and need, and regardless of where they're from, they deserve basic health care, yes?
I'm not being racist. You're missing my point. My point is the numbers.
That is a basic human right and basic human need. Yes?
Everybody has the right to be in Canada legally, right? But our government has messed up in bringing too many people in for our structure.
Again,
what statistics?
Look at the provincial government and how they negotiate for people to come in.
Didn't they?
So that's on Doug Ford. So Doug Ford and the Conservatives are the ones you should be looking at, not federal government, right?
No, I started with the federal government, doing the deals for the immigration, because they spend a bunch of money. They want more people in the country too, because it's a tax base. If they have the numbers, they can go to the bank and say, look, this is what the populace we have. We can borrow the whatever amount, facilitates to the population. So you guys like me and you aren't having kids, so they need to up the numbers so they can go to the bank and borrow money. That's why they can keep printing money and hand it out like candy.
Well, hang on a second. Getting a loan from the bank doesn't mean you're printing money.
Bank of Canada.
No.
No, this is not how the banking works at the federal level.
Joe, do you want to explain that a little?
I'll give it a shot on this one. So, I understand. First of all, I'm a little confused in regards to you said two very different things. It's like more population coming in here means they can go to the bank to borrow more money, and then they're going to be printing because of that. They can print more money. Those are two different statements, because especially at the federal level, these are two separate things. A federal level budget isn't the same thing as as your budget for a business or a house. It is not the same thing, because the federal level, you own the currency. The currency is what you have. And when it comes to it, the deficit, people think the deficit is the most horrible thing and everything needs to be a balanced budget. But the actual fact is, you kind of need a deficit. And you need to spend more money than you actually make, because you need to get more money into your economy. Now, generally, what happens is when it comes to taxing and collecting your taxes, is what they do is called a print burn system. They collect all your money, so you're paying your taxes at the end of the year. They get all that money from your taxes and they throw it into an incinerator, figuratively, not literally, but they destroy the money from the economy. And the way they bring the money back into the economy is they print money to replace it. And they will add or remove depending on how the economy is going during its state. They obviously don't want to put in too much money. They have a whole equation and all the amounts that to make sure they don't do the thing where they print too much money and they end up having a problem with Greece. But the reality is, you never have a problem where you're going to have too much debt because you are paying the money based on how much, based on how much it's going to be needed for your budget. Now, Canada's doing very well in regards to doing a very well balanced budget where we're not borrowing or we're not printing more than we need. Unlike the States right now, which continuously right now keeps adding in regards to their current debt level,
Yep.
which is a concern
We're
there.
not printing more than we need. How many billions went to Ukraine? How many billions or
Yeah,
millions?
you're talking about specific individual things as to, but how does that affect
That's
the
money that
overall?
should be staying in Canada.
Yeah, but
Going
that's a
to our
feeling.
healthcare
That's a
system,
feeling in regards to
going-
where that money should be. That's not to say that's not that it is or isn't causing you problems. And you're not saying that it is or isn't. You have a feeling that that money going there is to yourself wrong for some
puff
reason.
path,
And as
bud.
regards to supporting an ally and also a trade partner and adding to stability of the world, which means we can export more goods to other parts of the world when the world is stable. So that's an investment we're doing there. But if you have a feeling in regards to
What
us
return
not,
do we get on that?
so as I'm saying, stability in the world means better, safer,
So you
more
don't think
stable
those
trade
politicians
partners.
are laundering any money?
Okay, you're starting to say a lot of rhetoric and a lot of propaganda right now.
Reality? You got
No,
the art right.
I haven't heard any reality yet. You're except for the fact that you have feelings
If you
about
drive an EV.
sending money to Ukraine. Like literally, money to Ukraine is an
Conservative talking
investment.
points regurgitated. Yeah, it's just talking points being regurgitated at this point.
So what we're going to do for a minute here,
I'm
guys,
out, boys.
we are going to move on. We're going to come back to see you next Tuesday, but Jay Hayes has been waiting quite a while,
Yes.
patiently, and I appreciate that. Jay Hayes, would you like to chime in? I apologize for you.
Hey
You know
everyone,
enough to be.
I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah,
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Great. All right. So, hold on one second. Oh. All right. So I think the question was, what's your most important issue in the election? For me, it's housing. Very easily at the provincial level, and you guys have kind of alluded to this. At the provincial level, it is incredibly easy compared to any other level of government to influence that. It makes the largest difference in our lives and is probably one of the more pressing issues, I think, for most Canadians. I think the provincial government is in a position to do a significant amount on either creating purpose-built rental housing, purpose-built market rate housing, or simply incentivizing through some level of deregulation or adjusting zoning variances in municipal planning laws. So housing, for me, I would say is my main issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And housing is definitely important because if we're going to be moving forward and moving kind of workforce around the country where we need it in terms of whether it's building housing or dealing with other infrastructure and moving forward with things, we need the housing, which we're already in a crisis for. So absolutely, that's very, very important. Guys, I just want to quickly, we're coming up on the 2-hour mark. We're about 12 minutes away from the 2-hour mark in our 24-hour Ontario Election Connection Marathon. So thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We'll be going through the night into the morning. Pixie Lee will be taking over for me in roughly just over an hour. And after Pixie Lee, we will have Front Night Feminist, which she'll take us through the night, as well as Nerdy after her to finish off the night. And to start us in the morning, you have Miss Radical. And the list goes on, but that's the next 3 or 4 people hosting. Appreciate everyone. If you can, keep showing us some love. Tapping is clapping. Guys, don't forget to share the live. Get people involved in the conversation. And I have one spot open here on the panel. So if you're in Ontario and you want to chat about our politics and what's going on and what your thoughts are going into the election, send a request, guys. I have a spot open. It's there. Be a part of the conversation. Don't forget, we do have the live goals going on up there, guys, as well as that little, I call it goldish orange heart if you want to join our team, as well as we do have a link in our bio. So if you go on over there to our link tree, we do have a link there. If you guys feel compelled to donate and want to help us at Beaver Politics grow, we would really appreciate it. But again, it's not something we're going to ask for and say that you have to do. We appreciate any donations as we move forward and grow as a team and move this movement forward. Really appreciate it all. That being said, guys, what's another big aspect? We've talked about healthcare, we've talked about housing, we've talked about education. Has there been anything that you can think of that we've missed so far?
First of all, I'd like to say sorry. I did not notice the battery was draining on my phone. I am not that ditzy, but I just went out. So sorry. Thank you for letting me back in. I was just talking about education. And I just wanted to say real quick that my daytime job is international student admissions at the largest school board in Canada. And so I see a lot. I have learned a lot about immigration because of my job. And I just came back in at the tail end when See You Next Tuesday was saying about now international students. He's talking about at a college university level. And one of the biggest things that happened there, which is not through the Canadian government or accepting students, international students, is that we had people setting up colleges and universities that were not accredited and not giving the students something that they could take. When we take these international students to Seneca, George Brown, Centennial College, Conestoga, we're giving them real certificate programs, whether it's culinary at George Brown, whether it's, business management at Seneca, and we're giving them, a certificate or a diploma in a degree. And when they go to Seneca College, they're paying an exorbitant amount of money to the college because an international student's tuition fee is higher than a local resident. Okay. So that's the first thing. They're bringing money into Canada because they're paying that money. Like their tuition is $18,000 at a college. Okay. So when we're saying we're cutting international students, they're renting an apartment, they're renting housing, they're buying food, they're using TTC pass, and they're not being a drain on our system. They, any kid that goes to post-secondary institution will also be offered healthcare or insurance, which they get included in their tuition. So, those students who are going to qualified post-secondary institutions are not putting a drain. But what ruined it was people who set up, there's always bad apples in every bunch, who set up in Brampton in a strip mall, calling it some sort of college and taking these kids' money and leaving these kids, not giving them any type of accreditation. And that was bad on them. But that was not anything to do with the Canadian government. Algonquin College right now, I think one of their locations is having to close, or it's going to have to, it's because of the international students that have been pulled back. And I feel that's really, really sad that that's what's happened, and it's just been allowed. That was my idea. I don't deal in post-secondary, but I do vet, because parents who come to college bring their students, and then that's where I get to see. So I have to vet their enrollment, their official letter. I get to see their tuition fees. They have to have that all paid and all in alignment before they can put their young children into school. I also see that Ukrainians were given special work permits for the first 2 years. That ended last March. Iranians also have been given express work permits, where, again, it's not a drain on the system. They're looking for the job and they're looking for work. Some people get those and they've had to go to Thunder Bay or Timmins or Sudbury to work in a Tim Hortons. They're not coming. But, I do personally think that it would be good if you are giving work permits or you are having refugees, that maybe we need to start saying, okay, we're going to give you a work permit, but you need to work in some other provinces. You need to go to other provinces because of the housing in Toronto. Like in Ontario, everyone wants to come to Toronto, and the housing is not available for people. It's not available. So I just
To be honest, it's not available anywhere, really.
No, it isn't available anywhere. But I'm just saying that I don't know I don't know if even in any other provinces, or it's like Toronto is bad. Airbnb are renting.
So certainly, like it's way more affordable in. Sorry to interrupt, but like it's way more affordable in other countries. The trouble is, there's a reason for that. If you move to Saskatoon, it might be a little harder to find a job there, especially if you got your degree in finance with a specialization in like some sort of trading that you could only get at, say, Toronto. It's a delicate balance. Strong, I want to ask you, what sort of reforms do you think could be put in place to get rid of those so-called bad apples that you were talking about earlier?
Like
The ones where,
the bad
sorry?
the bad colleges and that. I think they were closed down. A lot of them got caught on to, right? Because students were protesting. They were protesting out there saying, I have no place to live. I'm not getting a degree. I mean, when you register at a college, you're also probably going to get a co-op work permit in your program. You're going to be able to work. That's included in your tuition. So these students were left out in the cold. And I don't know as a government, like what they did. I know that it Conestoga got clocked bad because they were putting in these, pardon my language, half-ass programs that weren't really giving. They were setting up program after program that were not really giving it. So they got clocked, and they've really seen, they're suffering greatly because their international students now have really, taken a turn for the worst. But if you're doing it the right way and you're, applying, now the government put into shape that postgraduate work permits would not be given to everybody who graduated from a diploma or certificate program. You now have to be in registered in a master's, registered in some sort of like lawyer, doctor program, things like that, where you're going to have work when you come out of going to the school, or you're in a master's program, doctoral program, something like that, where they will give you your postgraduate work permit. But they're going to stop. I think it's now, or it's ramping up to the close is like August, where starting September, just because you take culinary arts at George Brown, you will not automatically, when you finish that certificate program, be given a postgraduate work permit. And work permits, of course, changed. Even work permits, you cannot apply for a work permit unless you have a labor market assessment. You have to have a job from a place in Ontario that you have to have, that they're going to hire you. And they also changed 20% to 10% of their workforce international. So for instance, you have a Portuguese bakery and it has 100 employees. They used to be able to do 20%, which was 20 people who were Portuguese. That's how you would get them over here and say, no, I don't have a Canadian to do this. I need a Portuguese baker, or I need an Italian butcher, a meat cutter. Now they've taken that down to 10%. So 10% of the workforce will not get work permits if they are not Canadian. And also, and you have to have that. The employer now you have to apply for a work permit with a labor market assessment. So you have to have, basically, for lack of a better word, someone sponsoring you. That's not really the right term, but you have to have somebody. Yeah.
Could I speak on housing a little bit?
Of course.
Yeah, please.
We've got somebody in here that keeps, we're obviously, we've got some kind of echo chamber type of conversations going in the chat. Now, again, I'm in BC, and I'm lucky that the NDP is cracking down on Airbnbs, and it's stabilizing here. Ontario's not there yet, and I think what people just hammer this. Yeah, right. And it's one of these things. Oh, it's immigrants. If we built 1 million houses tomorrow, people like me, that I work really hard, I've got amazing credit, I've got like no debt. BlackRock's going to buy that house before I do, or somebody that is, maybe invested in real estate, and they've got 10 houses in Toronto or Vancouver that they can sell. It doesn't matter if the housing is built. It's definitely not immigration that's causing that. It's corporate landlords. And that was the huge thing when I saw Jagmeet. I'm pretty pro NDP. When I saw him going, I want corporate landlords, I want BlackRock out of Canada. And that spoke to me, because we could bolster at every level, from federal to provincial to municipal to whatever level you want. If we could subsidize contractors, we could do everything possible to make building easier, eliminate red tape, whatever. people still can't compete in that market. And it's not immigrants that are coming here on a visa working part-time at Uber while they're putting themselves through school at all. It's absolutely not. It's BlackRock and corporate investments and the landlords that have made, and whatever, if you're a landlord, that's your thing. It's not really my thing, but as somebody that is in my mid 30s, when I moved to Mackenzie from Prince George, I was working 20 hours a day at 2 jobs. And that's seat time. That's not greasing. That's not my lunch break. That's not my pre-trip. That's not grabbing my keys and getting my sites laid out. That is my butt in the loader. And that was also training loader operators. And my rental sold. I could not afford to live in Prince George anymore. I live in my parents' basement right now. I'm running loader 12 hours a day and I'm living in my parents' basement. And we were speaking on, okay, you moved to Saskatoon. Now you can't get a job. I am a loader operator with over 10,000 hours just in a loader. I run excavator, rock truck. I went and got certified for that. Class 3 air brakes. I run skidder. I run logging equipment. And we had the pipeline getting twinned. I've got 2 mines here within a couple hours of me. There's logging shows. I cannot get hired. I can't. It's absolutely operators. It's so flooded. We have guys, I'm in like operator and logging groups for BC and Alberta, and people like, oh, I want to come to BC. People like, don't. Like, I'm not trying to be rude, but don't, because there's no work here, buddy. I'm unemployed too. It's like I know people here. I shake hands with people on the daily that run logging shows here, and I can't get on because there's a million guys that have 20 years, 15 years. They've got way more experience. And I moved here thinking, oh, I'll get on at the mine and I'm going to have a house in 6 months. And nope, I can't even get a rental here. There's no rentals even here because everyone's moving. Oh my God, I got to move my family here. And I even had a friend. So my friend, she's a nurse. And then her husband was like me. He's an operator. He's more of an excavator operator. And they left. They bought a house and they turned around and they sold it as fast as they could because he couldn't get hired. And she goes, I can work anywhere. She's a nurse. She's in high demand everywhere. And absolutely she is. And they left. And these small towns, it's not just a matter of, mills closing down, logging slowing down. It's the fact that people are being pushed away and they take teachers with them. If their wife is a teacher, if their wife is an administrator, and they take those people away too. And these towns slowly die. There's an elementary and a secondary school, and they're going to amalgamate the 2 schools because they cannot justify keeping the 2 schools open. They're going to run a K through 12. Our ER is open sometimes 3-4 days a week, and the rest of the time it's closed. We cannot keep staff. And a really crazy thing is that this little town of Mackenzie of 2,900 people, this town used to provide, I think it was it was over 40% of the tax revenue for the province of BC in its heyday. And the government has completely turned its back on this town. There's no subsidizing in logging. No one's subsidizing mills. And when you move to small towns, I've had friends that moved to Bear Lake and then Polar shut down and the Scales shut down and they can't sell their house. I'm not buying here. I could get a smoking job making $60 an hour wrenching on trucks tomorrow. I'm not buying a house here because I'll never sell it and I'll never rent it. It's not as simple as just shuffling to small towns because the work isn't there. Everything's become so centralized. And where I am, it's a lot to do with logging and mills. It's a huge component of it. But it's also the fact that the way that the towns run is that there's a lot of favoritism in these small towns. Buddies hire each other, and young guys can't get in, and no new blood comes into these small towns, and they get starved for taxes and they die. And yep. I'm going back to Prince George for school. I'm sure if I'm not there for less than 2 years, I'll buy there and I'll move if I have to. But I'm going to have to move probably to Alberta to make the money to buy a house, because even in Prince George, even if I do make $40, $50, $60 an hour in a few years, it'll be still hard to scratch up that down payment. While I'm paying $2,000, $2,500 rent, it's going to be really, really hard to scratch up that down payment for a house. There's trailers that are going for $500,000 in a park. Yep. And you can't get a traditional mortgage. Now I'm looking at chattel loans or a line of credit, and the way homeownership has so many barriers. You're either stuck in a big city paying exorbitant rent, or you move to a small town where there is very unstable opportunities. Mills close, mines go to half capacity, logging shows pack up and leave. We had 2 shops, a welding shop, and 3 logging shows in the last year all pack up and leave this town. And that's a huge dent in a town of 3,000 people. They all went to Alberta. They're gone.
And that's what we're seeing. So just for context, like I'm in Northern Ontario, so we're all forestry and mining for the majority up here in Northern Ontario, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing lumber mills close their doors. We're seeing paper mills close their doors. We're seeing different mines close their doors, and it is affecting now the people that have lost their jobs due to the closing of these facilities. I mean, the vast majority. So my town, we had a paper mill close, and the vast majority of people have either found jobs in either the mining sector, or a lot of them did move somewhere else to be able to find a job within their sector. And it's good because right now, like, we really just need the workers across the country in so many different sectors that it was easy for them to pick up and find something else. But like you said, in a lot of cases, they do have to leave the communities or leave the areas because the jobs just aren't readily available. And we're seeing, especially here in my district, where the municipality I talked about earlier has picked up financial responsibilities that have been dumped on them from the province.
Yep.
So unfortunately, instead of trying to focus on, getting more jobs in the area and getting the good business that will hire the local workers, we're not seeing that because the municipalities don't have as much money to play with when it comes to trying to attract new businesses and getting those jobs to come into the area.
Absolutely.
Sasquatch, I want to push back a little bit if I can. So while I don't disagree with, like, I'd say probably 90% of what you said, the jobs aren't where the housing is, and when you do find housing, especially in things like logging, natural resource sector, it is precarious, and that those nepotistic sort of practices do exist because everyone knows each other, etc. I don't know that eliminating the incentive for large companies to buy up homes is the best way to go about it, because that is, at the end of the day, is a demand that would be usually down to develop houses. Where I take issue with it is where those companies, those large, multinationals or large real estate developers will buy up single family homes or single use buildings and not develop those further. If you create incentives to develop those, let's say, you want to buy a single family home, go for it. But you have to create, like, either one of those homes or one of those units has to be, let's say, an affordable housing unit, or you have to convert it to increase the net number of units. I'm all for it. We need people willing to develop and to buy up these houses.
But at
Right
the
now
same
we
time,
have,
if they develop more and buy more, then all we're doing is just increasing profit. If we're gonna just keep letting them build but continue to just buy and rent, then we're at a net zero. How is that not a lateral move? And sorry, as somebody that has pulled 20-hour days in a piece of heavy equipment or 18-hour days in a friggin' grapple skidder, and I have to come home and pay someone else's equity, and I'm diabetic, so how am I supposed to retire when I'm paying someone else's mortgage? So I'm supposed to go climb in a skidder with no feet, and then I'm going to pay 40 grand to retrofit it so it's hand controls because I don't have feet anymore, or I'm
I
on.
don't.
I'm just
Go ahead,
saying,
Doug.
for me, I'm sorry. I have worked too goddamn hard and been too goddamn good with my money to watch somebody else make equity off my back, because I know not one landlord that I've ever paid money to has ever pulled a 20-hour day in a piece of heavy equipment. I know they're not driving around a 2001 Cavalier, and I know that they've gone on vacation. Last time vacation I took, I got 2 days to Edmonton in 2019. Before that, the last time I left the country when I was a kid, I went to Hawaii once. That's it. I can't.
Again, like, I don't disagree with you that,
So if we're
I
going to
think
have them, if they're going to build, they're not building to create housing. They're building to create profit for themselves. If they're just going to build a house and buy it and rent it out, cool, there's housing. It's still being rented. It's going to be at a huge markup, and it's still keeping people like me out of the housing market, and I'm not fucking taking it anymore. If you want to come out at minus 40 and go run 20 hours a day in a loader and go pay someone else's mortgage, you can come out with me, sweetheart. You go get smashed around in a loader. I don't know if you know what a grapple skidder is. It's like riding a mechanical bull around for 14 hours, and that doesn't count the 4 hours of driving, changing tires.
Oh, I think Sasquatch. Did you?
Sasquatch, I think you accidentally mute
Oh, you left.
or disconnected.
Oh, I think
Sasquatch's battery might have died.
Yeah.
maybe
could be it, yeah.
she had strong women syndrome.
have.
She was passionate, but she might have either she accidentally disconnected or maybe her battery died. I'm thinking the latter.
No, I
I
don't
think
know
in
what
We'll
the,
find out
happened.
soon
I
enough.
just want to say in reference to what we want to talk about for the election, I think she kind of in a roundabout way, like the landlords, that's been a big part of what we see Doug Ford at as this premier, is that he's for the landlords. That's what we feel, and it feels kind of defeatist, right? Like that we're thinking at every turn. I mean, he changed that rule for anything built after 2018, and it doesn't have, what do you call it, restrictions. So I feel
Uh,
just
Rent
Rent
control,
control.
overall
yeah.
Yeah,
After
he removed
2018, any
rent
new
control.
bills.
rent control,
Yeah.
yes, that's
Yeah.
what I was looking for. And I mean, I just feel overall when we're talking about the things that are important to us, when you're talking about housing, he's not for the little guy. He's not for us succeeding. He's for his buddies off the rich backs of the landlords and everything that
And
they can get.
yeah, and even on, since we're talking about housing, guys, especially in Ontario, um, looking at the debates the way I did, I watched them, I broke them down, and when it came to housing, really, the only two that said they would take on the responsibility on the provincial level again, in terms of social um, housing or social affordable housing, I should say, was the NDP and the Green Party, where the Liberals had said they would cut different fees that developers have to pay, that sort of stuff, but they didn't say they'd take it on a provincial level. And as well, I mean, Doug Ford, we know his track record. We Ontario is looking at the lowest amount of housing built startups in Canada across the board when in terms of provinces right now, right? So put that into
Sasquatch is back.
consideration.
Sorry, Mackenzie has. We just got our first 5G towers, so we're a little behind in the old infrastructure sector there. Yeah, I'm sorry. Anyone that wants to argue about landlording and having these corporations come in and build and then rent them back out to me, they can come out to the bush with me. I've pulled over 30-hour shifts chasing forest fires in the bush and gone home to a rotten 1 bedroom with cockroaches that cost me like over $2,000 a month. And I'm sorry, that landlord, him and his wife owned 5 units in the building, and they were in China and Mexico and traveling all year. Neither of them had worked in decades. And I am out here covered in grease, trying to fix machines I don't even know how to fix, trying to be a heavy-duty mechanic, and I've barely started running equipment. And I'm sorry. If you want to own a house, you pay your mortgage. I will gladly pay my own. I will never rent. I don't care how bad things get. I'll downsize to an apartment or a townhouse. I will never rent to someone else because of my experience. And I'm sorry, I work hard. It's nothing against anyone that's disabled or works part-time or has kids. It's no shot to them. But I work really fucking hard in very hard conditions. And I have earned my right to own my own home. And another thing, I've been booted from rental to rental. That rental I was in, the one before was $500 cheaper and nicer. The one before that was like almost $1,000 cheaper. I was paying like $1,200 for the one, and that was within a span of 2 years, because people want to flip and buy. And you know what? Great, go pay for it yourself. You go and pay for it yourself. I can't I'm not going to go and give people rides in my car and subsidize my car payment. No, you pay for your own house, or if they want to get it off my back, they can come run one shift.
Yep.
They can come on one day in my world, and then they can let me know that they deserve.
I've been pretty big on advocating for is terms of, when it comes to housing, everybody gets a seat at the table and they get their first helping, quote unquote. And then we worry about people owning more than one property and, moving forward that way. Angela, it's been a little bit. Did you want to chime in?
Well, exactly what she's saying about the rent control here is one thing. It's one major factor we have. So Doug Ford hasn't strengthened that. What has he done instead? He allows landlords. There's insecurity now. There's the insecurity. Now, when you're renting, and I've known so many who've gone through the situation, well, the landlord would say, I'm sorry, but you'll have to leave because a family member is moving in, or this and that, because they want to take the rental, right? They want to take it, and they want to get someone else in that they can get more of a profit for. We have no security anymore. There's no security.
Absolutely.
I'm sorry I fumbled a little bit on that one. But I'm saying there's no security.
Yeah. Joe, Strong, and Jay Hayes, you got anything to add to the conversation?
Yeah, I completely agree in regards to it's one of those things I actually watched both in the provincial as well as the federal. And the federal one I didn't really realize I wanted to look for till closer to the end in regards to the federal liberal debate when we were discussing about a lot about the pricing and the runaway costs. And I think it's Gould's fault because she distracted me with her talk of UBI. I'm like, hello.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful to hear, and it was also very distracting. But I also noticed that they didn't talk about, hey, what about runaway pricing? Not only just rents, but there's also increased cost of food, increased costs of all sorts of different businesses that are right now down to an oligarchy or even worse, monopolies, where these pricing is really affecting everybody here. But we're not getting, we're not having any discussions of, hey, we are being affected by this. Is anybody going to actually sort of address this so that we're not paying runaway prices? We've done it to other things. Why aren't we doing this? And I haven't heard anything about this in regards to the provincial level either, at least not too much. And I mean, I would have loved to heard a little bit more from Bonnie or Marit in regards to like, yeah, let's get some rent controls. At least that should be doing a fair amount for the housing market, particularly those who are working the lower end jobs that are lower end by in regards to pay scales that won't be able to afford it if they don't have that. And these are jobs that these businesses say they're absolutely essentials that they can't fill. Well, cool. You're not going to pay them more, then make the housing at least more affordable and make them food more affordable. Just want to live in wage.
No,
For Christ's sakes.
it's
Sorry.
funny, Joe. Actually, sorry, I want Strong if you want to say something before I go, please.
No, are you sure? I don't really have anything to add. My thing, like I said before, I'm strictly focusing on Doug Ford in this election. And what I'm saying is, I don't see any. The only time I ever saw an idea from Doug Ford to build anything was on the flippin' green belt where he wasn't supposed to. That was the only time he came forward and he said, yeah, we're going to develop. It's like, wait, wait, wait. I'm like, I don't know the ins and outs if this is possible, but I'm like, why didn't we build something in Ontario Place? Why weren't we creating something? Even Toronto is looking for, they have those mini little houses. Why don't we make a community for the homeless? Why don't we make a garden and make them have their food and sustainable and give them those little units? And I don't know if that would work out, but there's nothing for Ontario Place or that land or anything. I don't hear anything from Doug Ford as the leader of this province of a place to build stuff. And like I said, that's not my, I don't really have all the ideas of it, but I know that there's people when you're in government and housing, you should be going to that guy and saying, like, you got to tell me the land. But the only place he came up with was to develop land that he wasn't supposed to develop on. That's the only time. And the other things are putting up condos for people to lease out. And now we have an absorbed, like, what's that going to do to the market? Because we have, what, 70,000 or what number of condos that are up for sale in downtown Toronto because they thought they were all going to get rich off of leasing them out and doing all that because that's what's perpetrated, But it's I don't know if they're concrete ideas. People could be listening saying, well, you can't build a housing community on Ontario Place. But I'm just saying, why is nobody even coming to me with something on the lake or this area or this here or wherever? Like, look around.
I completely agree with you, Strong, and I think at its core, it's just we don't have like some sort of global agreement that we are willing to do at the provincial level the scope that this kind of demand needs. And if you wanted to actually bridge the housing gap, you would need to fuel something along the lines of hundreds of billions of dollars at the provincial level. We have something like a million, or sorry, not a million. I think it's over 100,000. No, it's a 1.3 million. I think at the federal level deficit. We're probably a very large chunk of that. To solve that housing problem, you need hundreds of billions of dollars, not necessarily to spend, but at least the capital to develop these projects and then to sell them back to the public. And you need to be able to flood the market with supply over the course of like the 1 or 2 decades. To do that, I mean, there are a bunch of models you can look to. Singapore, I think, offers the best one. they have a
But
program where
those plans also need to make sure that they also lock out private investment from those homes, because that's the biggest driver, and
yeah,
that's what's taken away from the home buyers.
Absolutely.
100% agree, especially if you're devoting government money to this, you want to treat the problem as like directly as possible. So one way to do it, and this is sort of how Singapore does it, they sell not, believe it or not, ownership plans, and you can take it or leave it on this part, doesn't break the plan, but they sell 99-year leases rather than what we call a fee simple, which is like the way we think of land, where you buy it, it's yours forever, yours to pass on, however you'd like. In this case, it's like in all but name a an ownership stake, but you only have it for 99 years. You can pass it on, but you can only pass on the remainder of the years you have. That's not the big part. The big part is the government will buy, develop, and then sell the land. Every person has something akin to an FHSA. Every person has something akin to priority. If you're first in line, or sorry, if you're buying a house for the first time, you get first dibs on these projects. But the big thing is just scale. They're able to build on scale because they've done this for the better part of like 40, 50 years at this point. But it's also a really good growth model because it doesn't rely on building to then rent indefinitely like the Austria model does, which is an excellent model if you guys ever want to look into it. But it relies on like largely stagnant growth. That's unfortunately like not us, so it's not an appropriate solution probably. But it's expensive. You're planning to. Singapore has achieved something like 90 something percent home ownership.
Yeah.
There are very few countries in the world that are able to achieve that. And the difference is made up with government subsidized market rents. About a third of that property is not government. So, like, of all the property owned in Singapore by residential for residential use, only about a third is private market units. And I mean, there are a lot of things that are unique to Singapore that mean we will probably not achieve that high a level of home ownership. But certainly, if you're willing to make that level of investment, it's something that we can achieve in Ontario. We are absolutely one of the most sophisticated housing development and real estate investment markets in the world. There are very few places that can compete with us on that. We have a sophisticated public-private partnership financing and development market, and we have a very large construction sector. It needs to be. There are some bottlenecks there that are very serious problems for growing supply, but those can be fixed again with the right level of investment. But like I don't know, I don't disagree with you at all, Strong. I think it's just an unwillingness to spend on the level that's needed.
I think the North American, we're trapped in the North American idea that we are just succumbing to being house poor our life. That's what we are shackled to. That is the thing. The ultimate goal is home ownership, and that should be a big part of your dream in life. And I don't know, like, when you look around the world, like, other people are not living in Finland, Sweden, or, like you say, in China, Singapore. They're not living house. That's not the goal of their whole existence, is to be shackled to this home, and that's been sold to them as the dream. Even like the whole way that we think, right? We think that, oh my gosh, I got a house, and that's the be all end all, and that the government, like the bank's going to make you pay for it for the rest of your life, right? Like, and well, the only way you can ever own a home is if you actually stay there, 25, 30 years. You stay in the same house. Like, you never want to move on up and pay it down, and you never, refinance it or anything like that. So I don't know, but how to have that shift in your mindset. I think the UK, my relatives are UK, and I think that the UK, or where my relatives in Scotland, feedback, is they do a 99-year. They do that as well.
Yeah, we do that in Ontario, by the way. There's a we have a Toronto Create TO. Toronto has a series of developments that are 99-year leases. This is like not a unique thing to Asia. It's actually more of an English idea. Yeah. It's something that's done. Absolutely.
And Doug Ford, the problem with this premier is he doesn't really care about us. That's back to my original thing. He cares about reaching the palms of his buddies there.
Absolutely, and that's what we've seen over the past, administrations that he's had, or time in office, I should say. Guys, I did bring someone else new up, so let's say like 51st.
No.
Can I say something quickly?
Yeah, absolutely.
We keep thinking that the green belt is safe. The green belt is not safe if Doug Ford gets in again.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. He admitted that he lied about that, and he's moving forward with it anyway during the one debate, right? So he was blatantly honest in that sense. 51st state, we're here talking about the Ontario election and issues that us as Canadians living in Ontario face. Did you have anything to add to the conversation?
I guess I was. By the way, thanks for letting me in. I appreciate that. Yeah, I don't know a great deal about TikTok. I've been playing around a little bit lately. When it popped up in the news so much, it kind of created a bit of interest, I guess. But my plan was to go out tomorrow. Very quickly here, I don't want to chew up a lot of your time, but my plan was to go out tomorrow and to, quite frankly, to vote for Doug Ford. When I especially after watching the Liberal debate the other night, I was kind of like couldn't believe some of the comments. We're going to put 100% tariff on Tesla. We're going to bankrupt Boeing. I just heard stuff that to me was too far left and didn't make a lot of sense. I don't know a great deal about politics really overall, and I thought Doug Ford doesn't seem to be doing a bad job. The province of Ontario seems to be doing fairly well.
So can we have a back and forth a little bit here, because I want to point out one thing quick and see kind of where you stand in terms of it, because you talked about the Liberal leadership debate the other night, which would be federal, and you're talking about voting for Doug Ford, and because of what you saw on the Liberal level, which that debate again was federal. What provincially do you see an issue with in terms of opposition parties looking to gain seats? Like what specifically on a provincial level do you think the Liberals are promising to fall short on, or policies that they've mentioned that you have pushback on or you don't agree with?
Well, no, you're absolutely right. I mean, on the federal side, it just, I don't know, it just didn't seem to make a lot of sense to me. And I realize you're right. I mean, it is a provincial election, but it just kind of, in some way, I think, taints the Liberal Party across the board, really, is kind of the way. And I know you're kind of, apple in the barrel sort of thing, but that's kind of the way that I saw it.
What's your key issues that you're going into this election voting for? Like, what's your top three concerns or issues that you're basing your vote on?
Well, I think the biggest one for me is part of what Ford has been saying, and that is we need somebody strong to deal with the 51st state. And when I look at the other candidates as an example, I just don't see it there.
Okay. Now, in terms of, you said Ontario's doing okay.
Before the next question, what do you mean by deal with the 51st state?
Well, I think that the economy in Ontario isn't bad. I don't think it's great, but it hasn't been bad over the last couple of years. And I certainly agree that there are issues that we need to address. I just don't. I think, again, I'm kind of tainted to some extent by some of the federal politicians, and that's kind of pushed me in that direction. So.
Can I just say on that level that for me personally, and yeah, I am a liberal type of person, but I feel like right now the liberal conversation is to match energy and not to appear weak. I feel like when they're on that stage and they're saying, because let's face it, Trump is saying some pretty drastic things. They're pretty extremist, these things he's going for. I mean, the gold card, they're very extreme. So I feel like saying, 100% on Tesla. Yeah, you're gonna tax, tariff us, and you're gonna do things. I think they're just saying, yeah, we have your back, Canada. So I feel like, will that ever come to fruition? I don't even know. I think I saw today that I'm pretty sure that Trump has now put over the tariffs till April 2nd. I saw. Right?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yep.
I can verify.
Yeah. So the thing is that I don't know if he's just if he's just trying to be an extremist and say these things and that. And I'm not sure if that's not what they were saying. Like, they are watching in the States. So when they're saying the race, and you see how he calls even the current prime minister the governor, and trying to demean him and not even giving the respect. So, I mean, you just got to come out and say, listen, we can match your energy. If you want to do this and you want to do that, and you're so extreme in your thoughts, I'm going to be extreme back. Like, you know what I mean? It's sort of schoolyard bullying 101, right? Like, I'm going to, you do this, I'm going to say that. I can't appear weak.
So,
right?
no, 50
Yeah. So did you think that? Did you think the debate, in your opinion, do you think the debate went well for the Liberals last night?
Well, I don't look at it as I didn't look at it as a liberal against a conservative or whatever. I think when we get into that type of debate, it will be completely different. I think this is people jockeying for the liberal leadership, and I think it's different in my opinion, right? It's for you to see which person would be the strongest. So if somebody's going to come and say, "Yeah, I'm going to put up my dukes, and I'm going to say, listen, you want to go toe to toe? I'm ready to go toe to toe with you." Like, I think that was kind of, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not coming to play, I'm coming to win, right? Like, so I think they wanted you to see them in a light where they were strong enough as the leader, so that when we go to have the actual federal election, we can then try to see at that part. You know what I mean? Like, I think we're just looking at the liberal leader right now. So, I mean, yeah.
So just towards 51st state.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned about how you think Doug Ford's the right man to deal with the current situation with trade and everything, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so one thing I pointed out earlier, and I have been pointing this out when relevant. So one of the things that Doug Ford wants to do, wants to open up the Ring of Fire up here in Northern Ontario. And he wants to do so to be able to get to the resources and the minerals to use, of course, here in Ontario. But one thing that I tell people is, if we are going to mine and, take resources out of the ground and out of where they are, the vast majority of our resources already get sent down into the United States. So what do you think is going to happen if we open up the Ring of Fire and, create this massive influx of resources, lithium, cobalt, nickel, so many other ones that he wants to mine out of the Ring of Fire? Most of that is going to end up down in the United States anyway. So regardless of there's tariffs or not, they're still going to, like, Trump in the United States is still going to benefit from us pulling those minerals out of the ground. It's not going to help us to do so. So in terms of that aspect, like, Doug Ford can act like a tough guy all he wants towards the United States and Trump, but he's really just playing into the hand of Trump and what he wants, because all Trump is doing when it comes to the 51st state, when it comes to the trade issues, Greenland, the Panama Canal, it's all about resources. That's what he's after. And Doug Ford is essentially playing in his hand by opening the Ring of Fire, right?
Beaver, I think we're probably agreeing. I certainly feel that we've been sort of sending our resources to the United States for a long period of time, and they are our economic partner. And one of the things I don't like about our politics right now is and Donald Trump is just, he's Donald Trump. He's a TV actor. He's all kinds of different things. So I think we take what he says maybe too seriously. And I am concerned that we, for many, many years, have been using our natural resources in the wrong way. We're not investing enough in Canada. So again, it takes me back to the Liberal Party over the last 8 years. I'm thinking, they talked about, as an example, they talked about bankrupting Boeing. It was just, to me, it was just like, oh, it sounds like Trump. You know what I mean? And then there was a discussion about DARPA in the U.S., and we're going to have this Canadian version of it here. So some of that stuff it's just like I said, it just seems silly. And I agree. I think if we're gonna pull natural resources out of the ground in Canada, then we should have a place to use them in Canada, just like we need to use our oil in Canada, our coal in Canada, whatever it might be. And I know coal's not the most popular thing in the world right now, but the reality is there's still applications for it. So I think we need to be smart about resources and not be sending them to the U.S., but finding the technology and the infrastructure to deal with them in Canada right now. It just doesn't exist.
Did you see that can't think of his name. He's on CBC, and he was talking about how the auto industry and using aluminum and steel and how that works. And I learned a lot because the raw aluminum and steel goes to the States, which is tariff, which is just to even make the pistons in the car, one part of the pistons, and then they're put into the mold into the States, then they come back to Canada where they're put into the casing that makes the
Yeah, it's
shape
absolutely
of the
wild.
pistons. And it goes back down to the United States. So I mean, the auto industry, when you're saying, oh, they shouldn't be, the auto industry, if Donald Trump's going to tariff aluminum and steel, like their auto industry will be completely.
The 25% tariff that Donald Trump is promising on April 2nd is the current date that he's promising it for now.
Yes.
Will completely cripple and shut down North American manufacturing of auto. Like that, there's not.
Absolutely.
This is every economist saying this. So
Yeah.
there's no debating this. There's no nuance to it. He will cripple a lot of sectors in North America, and a lot of sectors because the auto industry is a lot of sectors, as you guys were talking about. This is mining of the ore. This is the refinement of the ore. This is now starting to build the parts. This is the assembly of the parts. And this is a lot of back and forth till you finally get the end result of the product of the vehicle. The car is the most complex device that's manufactured with so many parts involved in different places. Most of them in North America, some being sourced also from Asia and other Western nations in regards to electronics and some of the other specific parts and components. Cameras always come from Japan because they're so, or China, I can't remember, because they're just so damn cheap there. And we now have cameras in all cars. Point being, it's all based on international trade, and to use a hammer as bluntly as he's doing it is ridiculous. So that's the end effect. But I mean, I got a couple of some questions here for your 51st
I just have a
date.
question before you start.
Sure.
Was that the sort of Boeing that he meant? Crippling Boeing? Is that what that reference was? Because you're building planes and you're crippling them using steel. Is that the same sort of thing? Is that what that was meant about?
Well, I look at the aviation industry in Canada as an example, and unfortunately, we've got, as you pointed out, we've got lots of resources, we've got lots of minerals, we've got lots of steel. What we don't have is lots of planes. We buy our military aircraft as an example from the Americans. For years, we bought our commercial aircraft from Boeing. Now we're buying Airbus, of course, but so we don't build aircraft in Canada. Really, when you take a look at it, there is a small aviation industry in the country, but certainly not. It's not very big at all. I'm just curious. I have a question for the group. Let's say hypothetically, I wasn't going to vote for Doug Ford tomorrow. Who should I vote for?
Who do you want to vote for?
What do you care about?
Well, right now I'm stuck on Doug Ford, to be blunt and honest. But I'm not 100% there. I'm still one of those folks that I'm not 100% committed. I just feel like when it comes to the pool, he's there. He's experienced. He's dealt with Trump to some extent in the past. So it's kind of like.
I think Moose's questions for you, which is, what are the top 3 things that are affecting you on your day-to-day life in Ontario? You need to answer those questions before we can even entertain anything
guys,
else.
before we get into that, I'm just going to quickly say here. Never mind. I think we got a bit of a understanding. Never mind. Okay, so the 3 questions. 3 biggest things in your mind, 51st state, that you believe people should be voting on. What are those things? So whether it's healthcare, education, housing, so on and so forth. What are your three key factors when it comes to voting?
I think jobs right now is a big one. I'm certainly concerned about jobs because of the threat of tariffs. I think in the short term, this threat is going to create problems for employers across not just Ontario, but the country. So I think jobs are critical to me. And it doesn't seem like a lot of people are really talking too much about jobs. I also think, and housing is probably number two. And people are talking about housing. The only problem is I don't think there's really a quick solution to the housing problem. And number three, I would say for me would be healthcare. And I think we've got a pretty good healthcare system. I just think we need to ensure that we don't lose it. So those would be the three.
Okay, so on those things, right? So housing, absolutely, first and foremost. Now, when we're talking about housing, Doug Ford has failed to meet his own goalpost that he set when it comes to building housing. Part of the issue there is instead of actually building new, affordable, purpose-built housing, they've been renovating affordable housing instead of creating new ones as well. He essentially put a ban on anything like duplexes or fourplexes because it was fourplexes, sorry, because he said they were an eyesore. Things that would actually benefit more people and get the housing out there faster for the Ontario people. He blatantly said he was against, and he hasn't lived up to his own goalpost in terms of housing starts since, the push back in beginning of 2024 is when the conversation really started. As well, I will point out on housing, like my community, I'm in Northern Ontario, and I'm in a community that's roughly 6,000 people. And it was actually just announced on the municipal level that the federal government is giving the municipality $2 million because the provincial level has failed to actually fund housing initiatives properly. So the federal government created the Housing Accelerator Fund, which is meant to put in the infrastructure, so sewer, water, hydro, all that sort of stuff, to make way for places that you can build purpose-built housing and get more on the market in that sense. So in terms of housing, Doug Ford draws an F at this point, given his track record and what he's actually been able to get done. Sorry, what was your second? Dealing with the United States and the trade situation.
Jobs.
It was jobs, healthcare, and housing.
Yeah, jobs. Well, under Doug Ford at this point, like we are at a decade. Unemployment hasn't been as bad as it is now in a decade, right? And a lot of that decade, Doug Ford's been in power with the Conservatives, and the unemployment has gotten worse under his watch the entire time. Right. So Doug Ford has nothing. He hasn't done anything to fix those situations for housing or the job market and unemployment this entire time. So my question, I guess, at this point, for those two things alone, is what makes you think that he's going to do anything different that he hasn't done already in his time in office that's going to fix the situations that his government has actually led us to by not taking care of the issues. And he's also had, remember, 2024, Ontario had a record high budget. We haven't seen a budget as high as we saw in 2024. And yet we got the least amount out of it as the people in any other budget we've seen in modern history. So what do you think Doug Ford's going to do different, 51st State, that he hasn't done already to fix things when he's had so much time to already take care of these things while he's been in office?
You make valid points, and it's a tough choice, no question about it. But I don't know that I could really trust the other parties any more than I can him. It's not like it's a choice you're making.
Why can't you trust the other parties? Because at this point, for the Liberals and the NDP and the Green on a provincial level, all we have is promises, right? Because none of them are incumbents. And I believe now, like in terms of the Liberals, we don't have the same leadership we had when the Liberals was last in power in Ontario as well. So again, all we can go is on their promises, and that's how elections go, right? They all make promises, and we have to go off of those promises. So what have the candidates on the provincial level done that make you not trust them? So whether it's Liberal, NDP, Green, or even an independent that you might have in your riding, what is it about those parties that you don't trust, or that they've said that you don't believe they'll get the job done?
Well, I think the biggest thing for me would probably, if I had to put it in one word, would be experience.
Okay, well, you've got was it Bonnie Crombie, who's been mayor of Mississauga for quite a while and has a pretty decent track record. Doug Ford wanted to point out how she raised taxes as mayor, absolutely, but he left the context of, like I've said before a couple times during the live now, the province under Doug Ford has really put more responsibilities and more spending onto the municipalities. So that's why you see across Ontario municipal taxes go up the way they have been, including where Bonnie Crombie was. I believe it's in Mississauga.
Yeah.
So, so that sort of stuff where it's the provincial government under the Conservatives already passing the buck and responsibilities. Doug says he hasn't raised taxes, but it's only because he's been able to dump responsibilities onto the municipalities, which is then costing us more in tax money on the municipal level. So it's really costing us more than actually saving us money if Doug Ford would have just taken care of the things in the first place, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what? I will say this.
I've got one other question for you, 51st State. And
Sure.
actually, and I'm not even asking you about your name because that asks so many more questions. But so the 3 points you had was jobs. And as we were discussing, jobs actually have gone down while with Doug Ford. And healthcare was your second one, which is really surprising. You're supporting Doug Ford, as many of us can point out, and it's been his repeated thing. He has been intentionally cutting healthcare, including money that's been sent to Ontario from the federal government, and just was not even tossed in it. We had $4 billion, the big one, which was never even brought to healthcare, even though it was sent by the federal government to go into healthcare to help us here. So with the intention to try to open up more private options for people to privately pay, as opposed to the public sector that we all know and love. And then the third one being housing, where he's also not only tried to open up the green belt for developers to develop into investment property, he's also unlocked rental caps to cause housing and rental property prices to go up for people to make it more unaffordable. So these three things being your most important things, and these three things being the things he's clearly has the experience in failing, and you're still leaning towards Doug Ford. I'm going to have to challenge you in regards to, are these things really the three things that are important to you, or is there something else that really makes you want to go with Doug Ford? Because clearly it can't be those three things.
Well, like you said, the first one was jobs, right? I mean, and when I look at the other three parties, I just don't see it. I just don't see it there. And I'm, like I said, I'm not 100% behind Doug either, right? So it's not like, it's not like it's a decision made on this is the best person. It's kind of like the best person of the I don't want to say the worst group, because they're all in politics trying to do the right thing. I get that. But I just don't see it with, I'm sorry, I just don't see it with the rest of the folks.
51st State, I got a question for you. What is the positive case for Doug Ford on jobs? Because
I think the positive case is, we need somebody that's going to be able to deal with the folks, the issues that are going on south of us, in a rational, and I'm not saying the other parties are rational, but in a rational way. I find he's a little bit over the top right now on Trump. It's Trump, Trump, Trump. And I found that again last night with the Liberal Party, to be blunt and honest.
Okay, so how is Doug Ford dealing with America and Trump? Like, what has he said he's going to do to deal with that situation?
Well, right now I find he's doing a little bit of fear mongering, and I know the whole country's is upset as a result of it. So that is a little disturbing. But Listen, folks, I hate to say this. I really appreciate the invitation to the group tonight. It's
there's one last question. If you
Sure.
can please just entertain me before you disappear.
Sure.
You're very concerned about the Trump and how to handle Trump. I'm going to have to ask you straight front. Can you at least explain your name, 51st State, and the profile picture in regards to your position on this? Because by first glance, I'm looking like you're kind of open to the idea of being the 51st State.
I'm not close to the idea. It's just the same as I'm not close to the idea of voting for the Liberals or the NDP or the Green Party. I'm very much have a very an open approach to it. I'm not sure what the right answers are. I'm really riding down the middle of the road and wrestling with which side to go on. I'm not a very political person. It's just in the last little while I've taken an interest in TikTok, and it's been kind of interesting the way the dialogue has been going. And booing at hockey games, to me, I just hate to see it, because that's not who we are. As Canadians, we're proud Canadians.
It's our Canadian patriotism coming out.
I know. I agree. I know. It's just not, to me, it's just not who we are, right? I mean, we've worked together with the United States for the last 100 years, and we will continue to work together with them going forward. And so the reason I kind of picked the name and kind of headed in this direction is just to say that we need to be a little bit more open-minded. And I love the patriotism. It's great to see people waving the flag. We should be. And when I look at our healthcare system, unfortunately I use our healthcare system, and I know there's problems in it. But I think sometimes we paint this ugly picture of the healthcare system when the reality is it's not that bad. So again, I hate to take off, and I really do appreciate it, but I got an early morning. I got some regulatory stuff going on, and I got to deal with it, or I'm going to be in the brown stuff. So I do really appreciate your time, and it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. I still haven't made up my mind, so.
Absolutely. 51st State, I appreciate you coming and having a conversation. I apologize if it seemed like we were kind of berating you with questions, but we're all civil and really glad to have a conversation and get more insight into a conservative voter normally, and how the discourse that's the way we can move forward is to have these conversations, right?
Yes.
Did someone bring up, have you ever looked at smart voting, 51st State?
No, I haven't. No, smart voting.
I want you to just go quickly before you go to bed to www.smartvoting.ca and look at your writing and see how it looks.
I'll do that.
Okay.
Sorry, smartvoting.ca.
Yes, sir.
Smartvoting.ca.
And that'll give you a little snapshot of what's happening, and yeah.
All right. Well, let's see how it goes tomorrow. You folks have a great evening, and thank you once again for allowing me in.
And the main thing is that you're voting. That's the main thing.
There you go.
That's the main thing. Absolutely.
Take care now.
Cheers, folks. Have a great evening.
Take care.
Thanks for coming up. All right, guys. So I'm coming up to the end of my time here on our 24-hour live. So what's going to go on is when I finish up, Pixie Lee is going to then go live. So there will be a time in between that there's nothing, but it's going to be a short period of time. We're back up and going. We'll be doing that between each of our hosts, doing this 24 hours. So before I actually wrap things up, let's start at the bottom. So we'll start with Jay Hayes, and we'll work our way up. And just, key points or key things you want to say going into the election tomorrow, and what you're looking to have as an outcome if we get it.
I don't know. I'm not particularly. I think we have an idea of where the outcome will likely land. All the same, you should get out and vote. It's a tragedy that we don't have a mixed member proportional type system, but you play the hands you're dealt. Just, I suppose, get out and vote to your best, and try, because that's a good way to show support for the policies you do support.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Angela.
Hi. So we need to recognize one thing, that our healthcare system is in crisis. And it's unfortunate a lot of people don't recognize that, with hospitals actually, emergency rooms closing down. We have over 2 million people in Ontario that do not have physicians. Privatization in our healthcare. And that's the one thing that people don't understand is happening very slowly, but it's there. And it's really tragic that a lot of people don't understand it, but it's because we don't hear enough about it. That's the issue.
No, absolutely. I agree with you on that. And, we need to find ways to be able to get more proper, concrete information out there and get it to more people that really have stopped paying attention because of voter fatigue at this point. Nothing's changed over time, regardless of the party that we've had. So why bother, taking part in the process moving forward? Absolutely. Joe, last thoughts.
Yeah. Tomorrow it's going to be interesting to watch. I'm kind of preparing for the worst, which is, I think many of us are, which is, I'm sorry, Angela, which is good for us at least to prepare because, if it does go better, then it's kind of a wonderful thing to celebrate. We'll have great feelings for it. I'm even willing to find the good in a minority conservative government because at least then there's room for conversations and rooms to at least stop certain things that are just terrible. I'm okay with, I obviously much prefer if we had a minority government with either Liberal and DP, but at least a minority somewhere would be good. And if we want to see if we can have the best chance for it, then by all means, again, we still have some time. Reach out to your neighbors, reach out to your friends, make sure they're coming out. Show them smartvoting.ca, get them out there, and let's see if we can make sure we can keep Doug locked out. One last example as to why smart voting makes a huge makes a huge difference. If you take a riding like in Ottawa called Ottawa Nepean, that is run by that is right now held by Lisa McLeod. She's a conservative person, and in the last election, she got 37% of the votes, while the Liberal candidate got 33%. A change of the NDP of just 4% of the votes shifting from the NDP over to Liberal would have that seat flipped. So that's where it's very important for people to understand, especially in ridings where the Conservatives don't have 50% of the seats. It's as subtle of a change as that can suddenly change the entire election. It is that quick. And that could be enough to make it that we have suddenly a new government. That's it.
Absolutely. No, thank you so much. You hit it right on the head of the nail there. Absolutely. Strong woman. Last thought.
I'm gonna ditto Joe. Perfect. Well said. The only thing I would add is that I am mainly an optimist. So going into it, I didn't want to accept that the short time frame of the 30 days or 29 days to have an election would impact. But I have to say, because my personal experience is that I helped the Liberal candidate in my area. He's new on the scene. He worked so hard every day. We were phone banking at night. We were canvassing during the day on the weekends, even in that heavy snow. And people didn't really know him because I have my MPP incumbent has been here since 2016. So I really didn't want to accept. I'm not going to hold on to that. Like when it started, that 30 days, it's too short. That's why Doug's doing it because, he wants to just turn it over like a flapjack, like a pancake, Same as Joe. I think if we could get a minority government, I would be more than thrilled because that train can't pull out of the station every single day doing something else that it wants to do. Keeps checks and balances. So that's it. I hope everyone will vote. I did say that at the doors. If they said, even if they didn't know who they were voting for, I said, well, as long as you vote, that's all I care about.
Absolutely.
The worst will be if we wake up on Friday and it's firm that we have the numbers or whenever we get them that only a dismal group of people only turned out.
Absolutely. Yeah. I agree with all you. It'll be interesting moving forward, going into tomorrow, seeing the numbers going out, seeing how things play out at the end of the day, given what we saw in the last election, what the numbers are suggesting so far. We might not have quite the push for turnout we were hoping for, but guys, it can change, and polls aren't always necessarily right. So keep that in mind. Take them with a grain of salt. A couple key points before I close things off and hand it over to Pixie is, guys, keep in mind we do have resources available to us as voters in Ontario. There's Elections Ontario, which is elections.on.ca for any of your polling station resources, where to go, how to get there, times, as well as somebody pointed out the other day. If you unfortunately can't make it out, guys, you can still vote online through Elections Ontario. So that's another way of doing it if you need to. As well, guys, we've mentioned it before, smartvoting.ca is a great resource, especially if you're somebody that's going to be voting strategically in this election. As myself, I will fully admit, I'm kind of on the fence right now, and I really don't know until I get there tomorrow. To me, the Green Party has the best platform out of all the parties. But the NDP in my riding is actually doing pretty well. And strategically, the NDP in my riding would be the logical choice to push back against conservatives. So I'm kind of torn in that sense, but I'll figure it out before I get there tomorrow. And just remember, guys, get out and vote. That's the main thing. I don't care who you vote for. Get out and vote, because the more people that get out and vote, the better our system works for us, the people. So keep that in mind. Remember, go check out the platforms again before you go vote. Just do your triple checking. Make sure you got the right info in your mind, and we'll cross our fingers going into when we start getting numbers tomorrow night. So, guys, I want to thank everyone for coming up and joining me on my stint of the 24-hour live. I really appreciate it. Joe, Angela, Hayes, Strong Woman, and everyone else that has come up throughout this 3-hour stint. And again, Pixie Lee's going to be taking over for me here. So, guys, if you don't follow us yet, don't forget to follow us, shoot us some love, and hop on over to Pixie Lee when she gets started. Show her some love as she gets going. And let's keep the hype train going, and let's keep the information flowing going into the end of the election, guys. Till I see you next time, stay safe, stay sane, take care of yourself and your loved ones. And Pixie Lee's coming up in a couple minutes, guys. We'll see you then.
Have a good
Thanks
night.
for having us.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you. I'm probably going to head off because I got to go in.